Hey everybody, it's tier list time. Okay, I'm going to talk about and I'm going to rank 57 paths in this game. So it's 14 characters, including the DLC, times 4 paths each. And I'm going to talk about Kingdom's Bounty Hunter also. I'm not going to talk about Confession's Bounty Hunter because it's kind of pretty clear exactly where he would be. But I'm going to talk about every path other than that. So I kind of avoided doing any tier lists over the past couple years just because of all the reworks. So path reworks, trinket reworks, ordainment reworks, stuff like that. So I just didn't want to make something that was going to be outdated really quickly. So now that the dust has settled a little bit and everything's been reworked and I've had some time to really like understand all these paths and play them and learn their kind of like strengths and weaknesses, I figured it'd be a good time. So I'll be talking about every path in this game. So in case you hadn't heard about early 2027 DLC, there is a early 2027 DLC announced from Red Hook. We don't know the content of that, at least the time of this recording. They said they'll announce it later. But either way, we have a little bit of a lull here until that DLC comes out where not a lot of things will change, so I feel comfortable talking about a tier list now. If you don't know who I am, I stream DD2 every day, twitch.tv/MarinerHawk. I've been streaming since June 2023. That's like a little after the game kind of out early access. I have like 5,000 hours in DD2. At this point, I do challenge runs and things over there. I also make guides and other videos on YouTube, so if you were interested in that kind of stuff, please subscribe. I will also be making videos whenever the new content comes out. Please do. Everything you need is in the description. If you'd like to check me out anywhere else, I would appreciate it very much. So before I get into the actual tier list, I want to give some extra context exactly about how I came up with the results and my thought process kind of while I was making this. So obviously the paths are in tiers and also the positioning within the tiers matters. So what that means is this is kind of intended to be both a tier list and a complete ranking of the paths from number 1 to 57. So keep in mind, I'm comfortable with the general placement, meaning like what tier they're in or whether they're at their like the top, middle, or bottom of a tier, but I could wake up every day and spend an hour thinking about whether a particular path deserves to be at number 27 or number 28, and I would drive myself insane, and I will never actually release this video. So keep in mind, if you're like, well, how is this one path worse than the other one? I could wake up any day and feel different about that. So I would lose my goddamn mind. I do have chapters on this video, so if you're interested in listening to me talk about any particular tier, you're more than welcome to jump to that. I have the final tier list in the description. So if you would like to take a look at that before you listen to kind of my justifications to it, whatever, you can watch this video however you would like. So you're not going to find a ton of negativity from me. I truly do believe that every path in this game is winnable, and you can win even with the bottom 4 paths. I've seen some games where the difference between the best character and the worst character is just gigantic. DD2 is not like that. Everything is good and everything is playable, and you can win with everything. So if you see one of your favorite paths that's in like B or C, and I'm maybe not super excited about it, I'm not saying it's a terrible path that you shouldn't play, that you should feel bad about, just that it falls a little short in maybe ways that some of the higher paths don't. But overall, like I do think every path in this game is good, and you can win with them, and they're fun, and you can enjoy them. So I'm going to be judging the Wanderer paths differently. So judging them in the context of every path in the game is just kind of tough. Because some Wanderer paths might be strong, but you just never play them again because the hero in particular might be better off just kind of being specialized into paths. That's not a knock against the Wanderer. It's not saying the Wanderer path isn't strong. It's just saying that maybe it's not like super useful once you have everything unlocked. So I'm going to be judging Wanderers based on like the usefulness of the path. So how often you play the path once you have everything unlocked. So strong heroes with Wanderers that still have purpose and maybe still fill a niche as opposed to just like Jack of all trades, master of none. Those ones are going to be higher, where like the Wanderer paths that just have like a Wanderer plus path, where you just never play that again, is going to be kind of lower. Judging Wanderers, again, it's just kind of tough in the context of everything. And that's just how I'm going to be going about it. It's basically like how useful the Wanderer is. If you're curious of my thoughts on a hero in general, you're better off looking at where I put their other paths as far as tiers go, rather than where I put the Wanderer. Getting into how I define the tiers. So the tiers we're going to be working with are Busted, S, A, B, and C. So starting off with Busted, as you can see, there's only 3 paths here. These are going to be the paths that have like no discernible downside. They are extremely good at multiple things in a way that I would argue is kind of outside what I would call fair game balance. But that's subjective, obviously. You just think of kind of the normal things in video games where if you have a tank, they probably shouldn't also do a ton of damage, and if somebody does a ton of damage, they probably shouldn't have a lot of health. These are the ones that kind of break those rules, in my own, personal opinion. So they're just so stupid strong that I don't feel comfortable putting them in in a tier with any other path in the game. So basically, to summarize these 3 paths, it's going to be like, why did they do X so well? Why also doing Y so well? While also like not having any downsides for doing those 2 things as well as they do. So the S tier is going to be the main characters of your team. So these are going to be the guys when you're sitting at the crossroads and you're thinking about how you want to make a strong team and what you want to build around. That's where these guys are going to go. So whether they do a lot of damage, but they don't have a ton of risk associated with it, or they're just really good tanks, or they just have so much utility they can bail you a lot of situations. These are typically going to be the first or second path that you build and throw down to make a solid foundation of your team. So a lot of these paths are going to be the ones that you think of when you think about really strong paths in these games, but there's going to be some in here probably that you may not think of as far as like S tier, but I would argue that what they do is so effective that they deserve to be in this tier. I would say the S tier is extremely strong. I would say the paths here are extremely strong, but not like in an overbearing way. They don't do like too much. They may not be able to do everything, but they're going to carry the brunt of your team, and they're going to make sure that your team has success no matter what confession you're doing or what kingdom faction you're going against. So the A tier is the most common. This is where I have the most paths. This is going to be strong paths, but not necessarily as strong as like the S tier. So these are going to be paths that can more than carry their weight, but they can't maybe carry the team in the same way that like an S tier would. They might have a small downside, or they might just not have nearly as much of an upside as the S tier does. If you have 2 of these paths in a team comp, you probably have a pretty good team comp. Assuming you have like all the health healing, stress healing, you know, you can hit different ranks, things like that. So some of the paths that I really truly enjoy in this game and that I would defend if somebody told me that they're bad are in this tier. So this might be my personal favorite tier. But these are really strong paths. They're just maybe not nearly as much as the S tier. So the B tier, back to what I said earlier about, I truly do believe that every path and every hero in this game is strong and has a purpose, and you can win with them, including the C team also. But with the B team, these are going to be paths that you throw in more so to serve a purpose rather than to strengthen your team. So they may not be amazing overall paths, but they do have good synergy with potential other paths or potential other abilities. These are going to be the glue. So basically, when you're coming around and you're thinking about, okay, what's the 3rd or 4th hero that I want to add into this run to kind of just glue everything together, because the S and the A are going to carry in their own way, but there's still some things that need to be done to keep the team running efficiently, and that's kind of what the B tier is going to be. So these guys are going to be the glue. Again, I know that they're in the second to last tier, but I truly do like a lot of these paths. They maybe just might not be like your starters, but they do have the strength on your own, and they do allow your team as a whole to run more efficiently rather than just 4 paths thrown together. These ones are going to be the ones that kind of make sure that everybody has success and everybody stays together in a way as a cohesive team. And finally, we have the C tier. So there's only 2 paths in this, so I'll talk about those particular paths kind of when I get to them. But these are the ones that, in my opinion, kind of need some work. They probably don't have a ton of purpose compared to some other paths. It would be nice to see them get a bump or 2. I would say these are probably the only 2, and I'll get into them when I get into them. These are probably the only 2 that maybe need a little bit of a bump. I think pretty much every other path is fine as it is. These might need like 1 or 2 more things to make them a little more well-rounded. One more thing I promise before I get into this. So up here is going to be what I believe to be the 5 strongest skills for every path. Keep in mind that this changes quite a bit based on your team comp or like the enemies that you're going against. But these are going to be your very generically kind of like the 5 that I believe every path should be running. So just to give you a little bit of a tip in case you want to try out some of these paths, or you want a different point of view, or just to get some extra context exactly like behind why I'm talking about. Those are going to be up there. Also, this is a public template. If you would like to make your own tier list and you would put it in my Discord, or you want to put it in the comments, or you want to come to my Twitch chat and you want me to look at it, I can tell you exactly what I think. Just because I have a lot of hours in this game doesn't mean everything that I'm saying is right. I might be missing a thing or 2. If you want to make your own tier list, that is in the description alongside everything else that you would need as far as my Twitch link and stuff. So please check those out, and let's finally get into what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to go alphabetical by the hero class name and also the order in which they unlock their paths. So this is what the order is going to look like. You can look at the chapters if you would like. So start off, Wander Abom. So I really like Wander Abom. I think Manacles is a crazy ability. Like, to be able to pull 2, at least when you master it, because it's kind of an early master, in my opinion. To be able to pull 2 and combo is really, really strong. Demon's Pull does the same thing, but with Occultist being a healer, he has other things that you kind of want to do with him. where Abom is like right in the middle, where Manacles is a good ability to be able to use, because it's the best thing that human form path does. So to be able to just pull like that, and really like there is a lot of enemy comps in this game more often than not, really get screwed up by this. So it can make your life so much easier if you're maybe a little bit behind because you don't have the mastery points that you would like, or if you're on one of the harder torches. A-bomb pulling forward can buy you some time. And also he has a knockback also with backlash, but frontliners typically have more move res. So you'd probably rather do the pulling. Um, it buys you so much time. It is just such a strong ability. Obviously he has absolution to be able to um, keep himself topped off both with stress and with health. So I really, really like the Wanderer human form A-bomb. Fiend and Moribund do the same thing, but with a better beast form. I'm not a huge fan of Wanderer beast form. I think it kind of sets a bad precedent because most people, like if they're gonna try out beast form A-bomb, they're gonna do it with Wanderer, but I don't think Wanderer is the best. I think Wanderer is not that great. It kind of does require, at least if you want to get max value, it does require like the enemy having block tokens a little bit, or it requires setup with Volans, which is fine if you have like an occultist with you, but if he's setting him up of himself with like instinct, it's just slow, and he doesn't have any way of getting rid of his own stress. He doesn't have a way of managing his own stress like Fiend and Moribund do. So I think Fiend and Moribund, if you're going beast form, are the better way to play him. And worst comes to worst, you still have the exact same human form A-bomb. So I don't think personally that Wanderer A-bomb has a ton of like really when you'd want to pick it. I think Fiend or Moribund is just better in pretty much every scenario. So I'm gonna put him kind of low. So I'm gonna put him at 54 right there. It's just when you have everything else unlocked, I think there's just almost always a better path. I'm just not a huge fan of Wanderer A-bomb beast form specifically. Love the human path. If Fiend and Moribund had completely different human paths, he would be a lot higher. But I'm all right with Wanderer A-bomb, but I think the other paths just sort of do it better. So back to how I was kind of judging the Wanderers. He's going to lose some points for that. But in general, I love A-bomb. He's super fun. I bring him all the time. But I always just run either Fiend or Moribund, or if I'm in a scenario where Unchained makes more sense, then I'll run Unchained. Overall, very good hero, but just the Wanderer, I think it's kind of meh. Try out Fiend or Moribund if you haven't. If you want to try a beast form that's better. But Wanderer, it's okay. So next up is Unchained. So Unchained is A-bomb's human form path. You don't really ever run beast form on this, although you could beast bile, which blights the entire team, and then you can switch to beast form and use instinct. But it's kind of a lot of effort. For not like a lot of payoff. Basically, the idea with Unchained is that it fits into a dance team either between ranks 3 and 4 or 2 and 3. And just adds like spammable combo to a team, which I think is really strong. I do like Unchained as a path. The best way that I could explain it, and I had kind of an epiphany when I kind of to understand the path better when I realized this. It's kind of like Banneret for people that don't have the Binding Blade DLC, for people that don't have Crusader, and I think it makes more sense because Unchained and Banneret fill very similar niches where they have a move forward ability that combos. And while I think Banneret is more useful, I think Unchained is interesting. I do like the Absolution. I think the Absolution healing the adjacent allies and also giving them some regen and also giving them some stress heal. I do like that. It's kind of it does a little bit of everything as far as the healing goes. It's not something that you want to have a full, you're not going to have Absolution like heal the whole team, right? But I do like Unchained for what it is. I do like that he can fix his own stress with backlash into a combo. So I think that is nice. I think Unchained's issue, truthfully, is that it to me, at least, it feels like it's just missing something, right? If you want to talk about Banneret, not that everything needs to be compared to Banneret, but right, but Banneret it has a good heal, it has Holy Lance, it has stress heal, it has useful things too, like tenacity, where add a block token to the entire team, rallying cry, to immobilize the entire team if it works out like that. Unchained just feels like it's missing a little bit of something, right? Beast Bile is okay. It does blight the entire team. It does set up for Necrosis really nicely. If you have on-hit trinkets like Sparkle Ball or something, it fits up really nice too. But to me, it just feels like it needs like one other thing rather than Manacles to move forward and then Beast Bile if you happen to have a good trinket for it. But Admittedly, you know, if you want to make a human form Abom path, it's kind of tough, right? Because you only have you know, 5 abilities to work with. So all things considered, I think it's a solid path. I don't think it's a great path, but I think it fits very nicely in my definition. I have it at 48. So in my definition of the B teams or the B tier. So what I said with the B tier is that they're kind of the glue that brings your team together, where you need something and you fit it in there. Maybe not necessarily because it's strong, but because it fits a niche. And in Unchained, it's you have a secondary stress healer, you have a secondary healer. It works out for dance teams if you want to have them dance with Spirant, for example, or Orphan, or Banneret. It fits that in nicely, and it also gives you some on hit and potential like necrosis value. So I think this is a perfect example. Unchained is of a B tier path in this game. It's solid, probably not the one that you're starting out with, but I think it fits nicely. Again, it just feels like I would like Unchained to have like one more thing, but admittedly, I don't know what that is. Maybe if Backlash did something a little more interesting, although the self-sufficient stress is nice. It's like almost there. But I don't know what I would say it would add. So I can't even really accurately sit here and say I know how I would make it just a tiny bit better. I think it's fine as it is. But if you have like if you have the Crusader DLC, you know, you kind of would play Banneret over Unchained. But I guess if you don't, I mean, it fills a good niche. Again, it's a combo spammer. It's a dancer. It has some healing, has some stress healing. So I do like Unchained. Just feels like it needs one little thing, but I do think it's a kind of a perfect example of what I would say is like a B tier path. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Fiend. So Fiend is Abom's beast form path. It's a bleed path. So I really, really like Fiend. I think Fiend and Moribund, as I said with Wanderer Abom, is pretty much always the answer when it comes to Abom, because they just have so much better beast forms, I think, than Wanderer does. If you have tried out Wanderer Abom and you're not a fan of his beast form, try out either Fiend, try out Moribund. The simplest way to play him would just be start with spamming Rake, or start with mastering Rake and spamming Rake, and then probably like transform second. So with Fiend in particular, Fiend is one of the best dot outputters of the game. Really, really strong. Rake has the ramping bleed element to it. Maul has very good single target. One thing I said I don't really like about Wanderer Abom is the fact that he can't get rid of his own stress. Fiend, although he gets 2 stress per ability that he uses, other than Instinct, he can get rid of 2 stress with a kill with Rage. And Rage does a lot of damage. It does more damage than you think it does. So if you're able to get that mastered at some point, whether it be in Confessions or Kingdoms, you can pretty much one-shot corpses. So that's kind of nice. It does make it so that he doesn't have to get stress healed by anybody else. So that's really nice. It gives him some self-sufficiency in that sense. I want to talk about a very important Trinket interaction with Fiend that also exists with Exanimate and Venomdrop that can really allow you to pump out the dots on these paths. So look at the wording on these abilities. Plus bleed dealt or plus blight dealt. This works on the ability and also works on any application of the dot when you use that ability. Let me show you an example of this. Exanimate was able to deal 10 blight over 3 turns with 1 attack. Because he's under 50%, it triggers the +2 blight effect on Punish. So let's do the math. I used Punish Plus for 3 blight, and then had 2 added to that from the under 50% buff. And on the attack, Curing Kappa happened to proc for 3 blight. So because it procced when I used Punish and he was under 50%, it added 2 to that blight also. So it was a total of 10 blight on 1 attack. If you're playing Fiend, Exanimate, or Venomdrop, look for any trinkets that have an additional application of dot. It can really ramp up the dot you're able to put out. Blight and Bleed both have trinkets that aren't super hard to find over the course of the run, so there's a good chance that you'll be able to fight at least one, and you can get some pretty crazy numbers pretty easily with these. I really, really like Fiend. The one downside with Fiend basically is because he does require kills to lower his own stress, he does kind of fall off a little bit in boss fights, right? You still have Maul, which is a really, really strong ability, but if you're going against a boss, whether it be a lair boss, like if you're going against the general, right, size 3, it's tough to. His strongest abilities are Rake and the ability to lower his own stress with Rage, and those get kind of cut down. That being said, even in a worst case scenario, you can still just play him Wanderer and just use him as a combo setup, or you can Maul and just pump out bleed that way. So I really, really like Fiend. I think it's solidly in the A tier. I think the one issue would maybe be he does require he snowballs so hard with mastery points that not having it feels kind of bad. But I think it's a really, really strong path. Again, if you haven't tried Fiend, or if you haven't tried Moribund, really try them out. I love Fiend. I bring it, you know, whenever I have a chance, whether I have a bleed team or not. He just pumps out so much damage, especially if you know you're going to consistently be going against size 2s. Fiend is just an absolute menace. I love it very much. It's a great path. So finishing off Abom, we are going to have Moribund. So Moribund, I think, gets kind of a bad rap. So I know, if anybody knows anything about Moribund, it's probably the fact that it works really well with Instructrice, which is Duelist path. And it absolutely does. That's very true. But I think Moribund is a lot more self-sufficient than people think. I think probably a lot of people, at least in my experience talking to people in the community, haven't really given it much of a chance. And I get it, right? Because Abom's the only hero in the game that has like a human and beast form kind of thing, a stance sort of thing, but like different than Duelist. So that's weird right off the bat, where like you don't have a lot of knowledge from other characters that carries over. So he's kind of completely new in that sense. And then also Moribund, being as weird as it is, it's a very unique path alongside Abom being a unique hero. So I think that filters a lot of people out of it, out of like wanting to play it. But Moribund is a really good path. So Moribund essentially, it uses stress as a resource. So the higher your stress is, the higher his stress is, the more buff that his abilities get, his beast form abilities. So he loses stress on when he uses an ability, but he gains it through transform. So the idea is that you transform, which gives you some stress to be able to use your abilities, since you can't use them if you have less than 2 stress. And basically, the higher the stress, the better the ability. So I have a video essay kind of in the chamber about Moribund. I don't know when that'll be out, but I do really like Moribund. I think it's really strong. You can get into crazy values pretty quickly when it comes to like Rake. The idea with Moribund basically is you want to master Rake right off the bat, and then transform kind of like as soon as you can after that, because transform gives him horror, which gives him extra power to be able to use his abilities. So it's really nice. Maul has insta kill chance, which is better than you might think. Obviously, you can't use it on bosses, but it is better than you might think. And Rake, you can pretty easily, if you start out with like 6, 7, 8 stress when you press Rake for the first time, you can pretty easily get to like 20, 25 like damage per Rake on 2 targets by like probably round 3. And yeah, I know obviously in zombie fights, is that going to make a big deal? No. There is a little bit of ramping to it, but he is strongest in the fights that matter. So whether that be faction fights, if you're playing kingdoms, or like cultist fights, for example, he's really strong, very self-sufficient. Instinct refills his stress bar, at least gives him 4 stress, and also can copy or steal positive tokens, which is really good. AoE on the entire team. Moribund is really good. I would definitely recommend giving it a shot if you haven't, with the 5 skills that I have. It takes some getting used to. You're definitely gonna have some accidental meltdowns. Keep that in mind, because you're gonna be at 6 stress and you're not gonna pay attention. You're gonna transform, and he's gonna hit 10 stress, and you're gonna be sad, because I've done that plenty of times. But I really like Moribund. So Moribund, I'm gonna put it right next to Fiend. I think it's an A. I think it's pretty much, it's a little bit like team comp based, and a little bit just out of preference. But I think Moribund and Fiend next to each other, I think it works out, because Moribund does more straight up damage, and Fiend does more damage if you count like the bleed dot kind of element to it. So I really like Beast Form Bigby. I really do. Comboed with the fact that his human form is so good, so even in like shorter fights, you don't even need to like transform. Moribund and Fiend both really strong. I think they definitely are in that kind of middle of the A tier there. So after Abom, we have Bounty Hunter Kingdom. So I'm not going to talk about Confessions Bounty Hunter, just because he's really strong, right? But you only have him for a region. Weird to judge. So Kingdom's Bounty Hunter is a nerf version of Confessions Bounty Hunter. But I think if you kind of if you change your view of him, I think you'll realize truly how strong it is. So Bounty Hunter can solo carry basically with his damage. Kingdoms doesn't do that. Kingdoms Bounty Hunter takes more kind of like ramp up to get there, meaning like you have a relationship to give him a strength token, or if you're able to hit into daze with finish him, or stun with finish him, or you're able to hit in a combo a lot, he can still carry. It just requires more setup. But really what is not honestly that nerfed is his other non-damage abilities. Flashbang is an insane ability. He still has stuns, both in the front line and the back line. Just the difference is you can't use it on round 1. Mark for Death, absolutely crazy ability. Caltrops, crazy ability. Like super efficient abilities. I still think Bounty Hunter Kingdom, if you just look at him as like a rank 2 who can slow the backline, bleed the backline, also he can stun, and also he can add combo and Volns. If you look at him more as a kind of a setup hero rather than a damage hero, I think you'll realize his strength. It's just a bit of whiplash. At least for me, it was a bit of whiplash coming over to Kingdoms, because your instinct is to just run him like high damage and just have him do a ton of damage. He doesn't do that nearly as well in Kingdoms, but I think he's just as strong. Honestly, if you change your view on him a little bit, I think he's just as strong. Honestly, damn near just as strong, just not in like an overbearing damage way. His trinkets are absolutely insane too. And obviously, if you're able to get one of them pretty early on in Kingdoms, you can get a ton of value out of it. So first top 10 hero right here. I have him at 10 right there. Just super strong. Anybody that has essentially unconditioned stuns is going to be really strong. And then all of his abilities are just so loaded. He can fit in anywhere. As far as whether you need him in the front or the back, he can pretty much do anything other than, damage and healing. Or sorry, other than healing and stress healing. Really good path though. A lot of fun. I think they did a really good job with him, not keeping him or just stopping him from being like overbearing, but also having him pretty damn strong. All right, everybody's favorite other armor boy is next. So here we have Crusader. So Crusader, I mean, as close as you can get. I would say he's pay to win as far as a game that isn't multiplayer. Like he's so good. He's just overall just an absolute glue to a team. Just you can put him in any team for any reason, and he just fits it so well. I think they did such a good job with Crusader. The fact that he's got a stress heal, he's got a pretty good heal, he does pretty good damage, he can tank pretty well. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So specifically with Wanderer, I mean, I think Wanderer's okay. I think all the other paths, truthfully, I think they kind of use whatever way you want to play Crusader. I think you're probably better off specializing. I think he's just one of those Wanderers. So no disrespect to the Wanderer, but like, I mean, Wanderer Tenacity is all right. Wanderer Rallying Cry it's a good ability, but it's just like a bit niche. And like, if you're trying to use Holy Lance or trying to use, if you want him to do more damage, if you want to use Radiance, you're probably better off using one of the other paths. I think Wanderer is just like, if you want to have him kind of tank, I think Templar is probably better for that. So again, with the weirdness of judging Wanderers, I'm gonna put him like top-ish of B right there. I do think he's good. I think there's value in like handing out block tokens with Tenacity, but again, truthfully, I think you're probably better off just picking a way that you want to play him, and just picking one of the paths. And even if you want him to do like a jack of all trades thing, I mean, again, I think Templar or Banneret does that perfectly well too. So I like Crusader in general. I love Crusader. I think just Wanderer, it's like, there are a ton of reasons to run Wanderer. I'm not convinced, but I do think he's really strong. Next up, we have Aggressor. So Aggressor, when I was defining the paths, I was talking about A tier, and I was saying these are where some of my favorite paths are. Like, yeah, maybe they're not going to carry your entire team, like some of the S tier ones would, but the A tier is where some of my favorite paths are, and I think Aggressor is a good example of that. Aggressor's best buff that it got actually wasn't even a buff to Aggressor. It was the fact that killing corpses now counts as on-kill effects. So he can one-shot corpses with Smite, and he can one-shot at least some corpses with Reap also. And then with Smite, on-kill effects, either on enemies or on corpses, lowers the stress by 1 or 2, depending on whether you have it mastered or not. And with Reap, you're able to get a strength token when you kill either a corpse or an enemy. So that works really well with the General Trophy to give extra corpse damage. Obviously, the Carrion Eater, if you're able to kill corpses like that, because he can pretty consistently with his damage one-shot it, especially if you're able to get him, like Gnarly Nux or something, that extra 20% damage. A tiny bit of damage that he gets pushes him over that threshold to be able to one-shot corpses almost every time. And I think it's really good. So one underrated element of this path too is that Smite and Reap don't consume combo. So if you have somebody else on your team that you would rather be using combo, you don't have to avoid hitting them, because you don't want to use that up on accident. So he doesn't get the self-healing like from Reap that's really nice, like he does on Wanderer or on Banneret or whatever path. But I really like Aggressor. Again, just giving him a tiny bit of damage sets it up. I know that there's maybe not a million enemies in this game that have death armor, but to be able to execute burning targets either through Reap or through Smite, I think is really good. And it can save you in the right situations, where like you're talking about a boss fight, or you're talking about stopping the Evangelist, the frontline cultists, from bouncing off a death's door and with a crit, and just causing you problems. So I think I really like Aggressor. I think it's a really solid A tier. So The hardest part with him kind of really can just be setting up the burn sometimes, but if you put him in rank 2 and you have a hero in rank 3, something like Sharpshot, something that can move forward to allow him to Holy Lance, which Holy Lance I like for setting up burn rather than Reap, but he also does have a Trinket that can apply burn pretty nicely. If he doesn't have any greater trinkets, you can even give him like Tinderbox and just try to get some burn on hit, and just the tiniest bit of burn is all you need. You don't need to build a team around him, and honestly, even if you don't have that execute, I still think he's worth bringing in the right situation. Just the self-sufficiency, being able to heal himself, stress heal himself, buff himself with the strength tokens. I really, really like Aggressor. I know probably on the surface, some people are probably thinking that it needs to have burn. You need to run like Runaway with him or something like that, or you need to run Holy Lance. I don't even think so. I think it's really good on its own. Don't sleep on those on-kill effects. I really like Aggressor. So here, let's talk about Templar. So Templar is kind of like tank path, frontline path, kind of healing received. So a note about DD2 is there are 2 types of healing in this game. So there are healing received from skills, which is pretty much everything you think of. 99.9 things in this game are healing received from skills, specifically. You have to just kind of like, you just gotta kind of know to look at the tooltip. So Bouncer's Belt, for example. Anything that buffs healing received is healing received from skills. And then there is healing received. Healing received from skills does not count regen. So Bouncer's Belt does not buff regen. Restorative Herbs, you know, any of the end items, they do not buff healing received from regen. So there are only 2 examples in this game that are healing received that includes regen. And that's the Baby Trophy that lowers your Death's Door resist, and Templar. So Templar has Rallying Cry, which is his guard ability that ups healing received. And he also has Tenacity, which ups the healing received on himself. So it makes it a really unique and really cool path in that element where if you're building a regen team, if you just wanted to build a regen team, you definitely need Templar in this. But that being said, you don't need to be running regen in order to enjoy Templar. So I know Rallying Cry not giving like block tokens anyway is weird, and it kind of is. I understand, because every other guard pretty much in the game does that. But I think the healing receive more than makes up for it. And I think truthfully, if you're playing Templar, you probably should be stacking block, whether it be through Bulwark or through Tenacity. So you should probably already have block anyways, although I do understand that it's weird that it doesn't give block on its own. So obviously, again, if you have any sort of regen, Templar is a good pick. It's also a good pick with Occultist, because if it ups healing received on somebody else, like via Rallying Cry, then it's less likely that Occultist is going to heal a 0. Obviously, it's not 100%, but it's a good like backup plan if somebody is about to hit Death's Door and you want to really try to push the odds in your favor a little bit more. Templar can widen that range in a good way and add a lot of really good healing to that. So he's also self-sufficient because Reap, at least Reap Plus into combo, heals himself. And again, that is it does get quite a bit of buff from Tenacity, or even if you're able to give him extra healing received. It's really cool to be able to copy regen or transfer regen based on whether you have Rallying Cry Master or not is really strong. I think Templar really, if you want to run Crusader tanky, I don't see much of a reason to run Wanderer over Templar. I think Templar is just kind of better at that. Like Crusader's just one of those heroes I think is better specialized in my opinion. So I'm going to put him up here at 28. So a little bit behind Moribund and Fiend, just because it's kind of hard to, like, there's just not a ton of regen in this game. But Templar is one of those paths that really could be buffed like overnight. Like if they added more regen into this game, Templar would jump up very quickly. I do think it's a little more useful than like Aggressor, so that's why I have it like that. But I think Templar is a really, really good pick. To be able to buff healing received, I think is really cool. It's a really interesting wrinkle to the kind of typical sort of like Carcass or like Man-at-Arms sort of tank. I think it's like right in the middle between that and like Flagellant as far as having a he gets good healing received, but he also gets block tokens. So he's kind of like a hybrid between the Flagellant style tank and like the Man-at-Arms style tank. So Templar, really, really good. You can always fit Crusader into your team. So if you're looking for a tank, Templar is a good pick. If you've played Banneret at all, you can probably take a rough guess on exactly where he's going to be as far as tier list goes. So when we talk about, although I think all the other Crusader paths are strong too, when I talk about Crusader being kind of pay to win, Banneret is the main thing that you're going to be talking about. So I know people said they wish Holy Lance did more damage as compared to the first game. Obviously, first of all, it's a completely different game, and I totally get that. But I think in the context of DD2, it's super good. I mean, Holy Lance is a really easy mastery point, probably Valley in. It adds combo. It has a 15% crit chance, at least on Holy Lance Plus, which is, in the context of DD2, really, really strong. It allows you to set up for dance comps, like in any way, if you're shuffling in any way. It sets up for some really nice setup with there, like Aspirant or with Orphan or with Highwayman or whatever. Tenacity, really strong. Anytime you can give tokens to the entire team, really good. Be able to get rid of daze or stun could be really nice if you have it mastered in the certain scenarios. Arguably has a better battle heal. I mean, it is a better heal, but it doesn't give them the self sufficiency that like the other paths do. But um, depending on your team comp, you might rather have him healing somebody else. For whatever reason, it isn't even has better ranks. It has better launch ranks than the other paths, which I'm not really sure why. I think typically, if you want to talk about like chaplain ministrations, typically, so Vestal can use ministrations in 3 and 4, and on chaplain, which is a frontline path, it makes it so you can use it in 1 and 2, but not 3 and 4. Banneret, for whatever reason, battle heal opens it up to every rank. So again, arguably, even though it's supposed to be a more backline version, it's arguably a better heal anyways. Rallying Cry allows you to, if you want to do some dance stuff, if you're going against the Harvest Child, you don't want anybody moving. It's really good for that. Again, if you played Banneret in any way, absolutely insane path. I'm going to put him very top of S. I think he's at the very top. I think Banneret just does everything really well, but I would not say it's busted. I would say Banneret is the best path in this game that is within the realm of, again, what I would say is like balance. Although he doesn't really have any downsides, it's not like Holy Lance can one shot, like literally one shot enemies consistently or anything like that. He just has a lot of really, really strong abilities. This is probably not surprising in any way, but I would say Banneret is the best path in the game that would not require a nerf in any way. I think it's fine as it is. And honestly, more important maybe than any of other balance stuff is it's a really fun and really enjoyable path. So I think it fits very nicely in a game like this. One that's really a path that's really strong and really enjoyable to play. All right, Duelist haters out. Okay, I am a Duelist enjoyer. I really like Duelist. So if you watch one of my most recent videos, I talk about 5 common DD2 opinions that I disagree with. One of them is the opinion that Duelist is not good or that she's not worth it. So I kind of talked about that if you would like to check that video out. I think Duelist, obviously, she's a bit of a complicated character. I don't think she's super complicated, but I think in the context of DD2, DD2 players just don't have the muscles to know how to learn a character like this. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I just mean that she's so unique and so kind of convoluted when you look at it, at everything, that I think people just don't want to give her the chance. And I totally get that. I simplified it in that video. And I think if you play Duelist the way that I think you should, or the way that is the simplest and the most efficient, with this graphic right here, which I made for that common opinions video, keep this, screenshot this if you want to play her. I promise if you play her like this, you will see her value more. She may not be your cup of tea, and I think that's okay. But I think at the very least, playing her as simply as most efficiently as you can, I think it will up your opinion of her. So one thing I want to say about Duelist specifically is the strongest single thing that you can have in this entire game is a dodge plus. And that is because it is a 75% chance of the enemy's attack doing nothing. No stress, no debuffs, no damage. If that's essentially a stun. So if there was an ability in this game that has 75% chance of stunning with a 1-turn cooldown, you would think that that's an insane ability. Okay, I know obviously that's not how it works. That's being optimistic. But the single best thing that you can do, and it counts with Grave Robber 2 with repartee, the single best thing you can do is have a dodge plus. It is on average, although it obviously doesn't happen like that, on average it's insane. So Duelist is a lot better. If you haven't played her, again, like the way that I say to play her like that, I think she does a lot of damage. She has a nice rotation. The dodge pluses are really nice. It gives you access to a dodge tank if you would like, plus some utility like with disengage, at least on Wanderer. I'm gonna put her in A right here at 33. Because I think she deserves to play there, or to be there. I think just the issue is that she's got a low floor, right? Where with any other damage character, if you play the damage character incorrectly, you're not going to think she does very much damage and you're not going to like her. But the difference is with somebody like Crusader, fairly straightforward how to play him at least decently well. Whereas with Duelist, there's a lot of ways that you can play her incorrectly, and I don't blame anybody that does because she is a complicated character in the context of this game. But I really like Wanderer Duelist. I do think she's strong. Um, and Damage Duelist in general, I think, is a worthy pick. If you don't like the inconsistency of the dodge pluses, if you're like, there's been plenty of times, right, where I've gotten hit through 3 dodge pluses and died. It's happened a lot for me, but I have I have 5,000 hours in this game, right? So obviously it's going to happen. If you just don't want to deal with that, I totally get it. But if you're willing to kind of be okay with the statistics being in your favor most of the time, but not all the time, definitely play Duelist. I think she's a really, really good pick. Our next path is Instructrice. I really like Instructrice because it has a lot of flexibility. So the cool thing about Duelist paths, whether it be Intrepid, Antagonist, Wanderer, Instructrice, you can play them all basically the same. Meaning like you have her in rank 2 and you do the Flesh, Meditate, Touche kind of thing. But it's just their stance passives are different, and you might run 1 or 2 different abilities, but you can play them all as damage duelists. So I kind of split Duelist into like damage duelist versus like her paths. So by that I mean like with Instructrice, if you really play into the buffing element of it, even then it has some flexibility. So you can play her mainly in aggressive stance, mainly in defensive stance, or kind of hybrid. So mainly in aggressive would be handing out crit tokens. You'd probably master it early. Handing out crit tokens with Ruthless Instruction. So you've probably heard it in the context of Moribund. It works really well with Moribund. It works really well with Fiend also because you can give a crit token to Fiend, and then he can rage and get a kill and lose the 2 stress that you just gave him with Ruthless Instruction. Aggressor, same thing. You can give him a crit token, Smite plus on kill, takes away 2 stress, so you can it's a net neutral in stress, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Again, is a really, really nice buff. Think about how much of a difference that like Gnarly Nux makes is only 20% damage, or Bloodthirsty, which is 30% damage. You can relatively easily get like 40 through 90% damage with Again. So that is really cool. That's how you would play it kind of the mostly aggressive stance. The downside would be that you would need to switch stances in order to lower somebody's stress, which can be kind of slow for like action economy. It depends on how you want to play it. I typically play it hybrid, where I will, depending on how the fight is currently going, I will give Ruthless Instruction crits out. And then if we happen to start a fight, or if it gets to later in the fight where we have a lot of stress, I'll switch to defensive and get rid of stress. So the hybrid way is the way that I like to go about it. You can also go defensive. A defensive way of mostly defensive stance that you can play it would be basically it would be handing out extra turns with Again, mastered Again. And then getting rid of that stress with Ruthless Instruction, and then just using Touche or Coup de Grace or whatever in the meantime. So there's a lot of ways to play it. So it is tough a little bit to judge because it really just depends on the team comp. But I think the flexibility is really good. I'm gonna have a little bit of a cop out where I'm gonna put her kind of next to Wanderer here, just because you can play it like Wanderer, where again you have that damage duelist element, but you can also play it buffing your team, and I think the buffing your team is really nice. I don't think giving a crit token with aggressive Ruthless Instruction and then like switching stances and then getting rid of that stress, I don't think that that's slow. Again, this is another one of those paths where like, yeah, maybe it's a bit slow for like zombie fights, but who cares? Like it's strongest in the fights that are strongest. So I really like Instructrice. I think if anything, I might be having her a little low. But Stress Heal just comes at such a premium in this game, and so do like handing out crit tokens and stuff, that Instructrice is just really strong. It just depends on how you want to play her and how you want to fit her in. I might be underrating her a little, but Instructrice is a really cool path. Antagoniste is the next path we're going to be talking about. Antagoniste is her debuff path. So this has a lot of really loaded abilities in it. Really, really strong abilities. So first of all, I think people on average probably underrate constant weak tokens. So defensive stance Touche can do that. Position Noxious Blast can do that. Hand of Light Plus on Confessor can do that, although I'm not sure a lot of people run that. I do. But just to be able to spam a big enemy with constant weak tokens can really, and if you know a big hit is coming, to be able to add a weak token to it, or hopefully at least hopefully it goes through resistances, I think it's really, really good. So you can also add Vulns with Touche if you play aggressive. I tend to keep her almost all the time in defensive stance. And the reason that is because I think it has the better abilities. To be able to stun into combo with the boot is really cool. Obviously, it's really fun also, but that is really good alongside the pushback. Disengage Plus is probably my favorite ability of hers. It is a double blind into combo. Like that's pretty crazy. So if you can build a team comp around it, to be able to have her move backwards and have somebody else basically move her forward, I think that is really strong. Touche hitting 3 ranks, it hits the 3 ranks rather than just 1 and 2, I think is really good too. Coup de grace is at least coup de grace plus is a stun, an unconditional stun essentially when she's in defensive stance. It loses you a stance, but it's pretty easy to get that back. 2 vulns and 2 weak tokens when she's in aggressive stance is really good. I think Antagoniste is just kind of, I think its biggest issue is, first of all, she can't use Touche from rank 4, which runs into some weird scenarios where she's kind of best in rank 3, in my opinion, because you don't have to worry about the dodges nearly as much. But if you disengage her into rank 4, then you either have to manually move her or you have to use somebody else's move to move her there. Although you can easily play Antagonist in rank 2. I like it in rank 3 just so I don't have to press meditation nearly as much. It's just that it's hard to get all the value you want, right? Because she's in defensive stance, but that means that she can't apply combo, which isn't necessarily a problem. But I would say with Instructrice, you can play kind of hybrid a little bit better, but with Antagonist, it's a little harder. So while I do like Antagonist, I do think sometimes it can be tough to fit into teams because, at least for me personally, I would rather play her in a scenario where I don't have to use meditation nearly as much, meaning like rank 3 where it's a little bit safer. But that puts her in to be able to disengage and then not be able to touche in the next one. And I don't really try to I try not to run flesh on her also, just because I don't think it's super necessary. I think it's a path that maybe, I don't want to say clunky, but kind of, at least as far as getting max value out of it. That being said, I do think it's a really strong path. I have it at 38 here, so the bottom of the B tier. Or bottom of the A tier, sorry. I do think it's strong. It's just I don't know, because I understand Touche not being usable in rank 4 because then she could just sit there and spam weak tokens. Like I said, I think weak tokens or vuln tokens are really strong. It's just sometimes it's hard to build a team around her and to get all the value maybe that you want to. At least for me, maybe I'm just salty that it's hard to use disengage and then get her back into a spot. It's one of those paths that she has so much value they can get, but it just it just upsets me that I can't always get all of it. So maybe there's a bit of a personal bias in here. I do think Antagonist, now that I'm looking at this, I do think it maybe deserves to be a little higher, but man, I'm not sure where to put it, and I'll drive myself insane if I sit here too long. But Antagonist, I do like it, although I do have it lower than the other duelist paths that we were talking about. I do think it has a really useful purpose, and I think it fits into teams nicely. Let me start off by saying I am an intrepid defender. Now, I am speaking a bit from a soapbox here because I play this game all the time, so I understand that statistics are going to work in my favor more often than not. So if she does miss a couple dodge pluses, I don't get too mad about it, but I understand that I am not the norm. I understand that if you played 1 hour a day or 1 run a week, Intrepid probably doesn't feel like a great pick, because that one time that she does get hit through a dodge plus for 30, not going to feel good. So keep in mind, I do understand that. I don't blame anybody that doesn't want to play Intrepid. I do think it's fun though. I do think it gets good ramping damage with the stacks. I do think that's good. I think this is safer of a path than people think also, because if you're really, really worried about her getting, punched in the teeth with the extra damage taken, you can use coup de grace to reset her stacks. You can use disengage when she's in defensive to stealth her so that she's unlikely to get hit, or if she does, it's going to be an AoE damage that doesn't do a lot, or AoE hit that doesn't do a lot of damage. Or you can just guard her when the stacks get kind of high. So I think Intrepid gets a bad rap because I do think it's safer than it might seem. But I exclusively run Intrepid when it comes to, if I'm playing her damage duelist, I will run it over Wanderer. Again, that might just be me, and that's okay. And anybody that said they didn't like Intrepid, I totally get it. But as far as a stacking path, though, I do think it's pretty good. And it's pretty safe because you do have, I would say disengage into stealth is probably the best element of that. You can also, again, you can guard her if you're really worried about it. But I think you'll get good value out of Intrepid on average. You'll get better value than not. But that doesn't make it feel any better if you have her with memories and then she gets hit through dodge plus and dies with the extra stack. So I totally get anybody that doesn't want to play hit, I am going to have, again, a bit of a cop-out. I'm going to put all the Duelist paths together because I do think they're all strong in their own ways, but they're all, like, you know, a bit similar, at least in strength. It really depends on the team comp. I'm going to have Intrepid a little better than Wanderer just because, again, I think on average, she is going to get extra damage, and you throw that into Flesh, and you can get some pretty good damage. But I get people not liking it. I like it, though. On to Flagellant. So we're going to talk about Wanderer. So, Wanderer Flagellant. Obviously, Flagellant is nuts in this game. Absolutely insane, right? But I think he's a good example of a hero who, even when you unlock his paths, I think there's a reason to come back to Wanderer. Wanderer has I love Wanderer's Sepsis. It is a super, like, efficient ability. It's good that it heals him, adds a ton of dots. When I was talking about how I was going to judge Wanderers in the beginning, it's kind of like, how do you judge a Wanderer? And for me, it's kind of based on, like, the flexibility of the skills. So if you look at Exanimate and you look at Maniac, for example, and even Scourge to a sense, I think you're running damn near the same skills every time. And I think Wanderer gives you a little more, opens up a little bit to run something like Sepsis, maybe if you can't fit it into another one. So, or to have a little more, like, Deathless, but not Scourge Deathless sort of thing. Like, I think the Jack of all trades sort of thing works well with Flagellant. I think Wanderer Flagellant is definitely worth pulling out every once in a while. I'm going to have him at the bottom of S right here, because, again, although it's definitely a strong path, more important, honestly, is that it is a path that you'll blow out every once in a while, depending on the team comp. It's kind of, you know, it's safer than, like, an Exanimate is. It's more, you know, blight based than maybe, like, a Maniac is. Undying, I think, is a really good ability that maybe is sort of tough to fit on the other paths. I think this is a good spot for him. I think this puts him, again, I think he's a really, really strong Wanderer. Our next topic is Maniac. So, let me tell you a couple problems, or a couple issues that I have with Maniac. So, to give a bit of context, when Maniac first came out, it came out around the same time as, like, Vestal-ish. So Confessor, the old Confessor now at this point, Maniac and Old Physician were kind of Red Hook's first attempts at a debuff path that, like, deals with tokens. So I think both the player base and Red Hook, I think, in a way, it was their first try at it, and I think they did a good job. Don't get me wrong, but I think Maniac is just one of those paths that feels like it's from a different era. I think Lashes, when it first came out, was a very strong ability in that Darkest Dungeon 2, in that era, and I think Sepsis was a really, really strong ability, but I don't think they break the bank nearly as much nowadays as they used to. I think with the new reworks, a lot of power has been put in the hands of the players, and I mean that in a good way, because there's stronger abilities, there's better things that you can do. So I think what was strong back then is not the same as what is strong back now, or strong now. So I don't think, like Lashes, for example, I don't think it needs a two-turn cooldown, and if it does, if you did keep that, it would need a lot more healing. And I think Sepsis probably doesn't need a use limit. So I think these are just things that feel a little outdated, feel a little bit clunky. I mean, he's not very flexible with his skills, because you're going to want to run Punish. That's your main damage. You're going to run Deathless so you can heal people. You need to run Lashes, and you need to run Sepsis for that setup. So that's 4 of your 5 skills right off the bat. That doesn't give you a lot of flexibility to run anything else. Because those 4 are like pretty much locked in. And I think, unfortunately, if there was any path that could use a different more, I think it's this path. More ends up kind of being your 5th ability in more often than not, because he just Lashes and Sepsis just doesn't heal him enough, in my opinion. Because another thing too is, obviously, you have to worry about death, right? So if you use Lashes and then she spawns at the end of the round, great. Now you have a big heal that's on cooldown. If you use up your Sepsises because it's a tough fight, and then death spawns, now you're in a bad spot. And yeah, that exists a little bit with, like, Scourge. You know, Scourge has the use limit on Sepsis, but Scourge has other tools to survive in the meantime. Well, Maniac, it's kind of the whole thing. So I would like to see Maniac touched up. They touched up Confessor a while back. Chaplain got touched up way back when, like Venomdrop, Yellowhand got touched up. I would like to see Maniac get a touch up like that. I did, just as, like, kind of a thought experiment. I with Christian, the help from Christian, who was in the Darkest Dungeon Discord, he helped make it into a mod. But basically, I spent a few days just trying to figure out, like, how would I upgrade Maniac or update Maniac. So I did that. That's a video if you would like to watch it. I would say at least check out the Steam mod page for it, just to see what I did, because I'm proud of the way that I kind of updated. I think I made it more interesting, at least in my opinion. So Maniac is one kind of final point on that is it's kind of weird because if you put him in rank 3, you don't have access to more. And that I think hurts his healing. And if you put him in rank 4, you lose punish. So I think it puts him in like rank 3. I like him in rank 3 at least, although you could put him in rank 2. I think rank 3 is better just because lashes and sepsis maybe is kind of sketchy healing. I just would like to see him get a touch up. I really do like Maniac. I'm gonna put him at like B-ish here because I think he's a good example of like a path that you maybe don't start with, but you put in to kind of fill a niche, to add like an extra healing. To me, it feels like the path is supposed to be like a main healer, like a Vestal or like a Plague Doctor, but I think his cooldowns aren't good enough. I don't think like the healing without more is good enough. For that 5th ability, like sometimes you want to run Suffer, sometimes you run Undying, sometimes you want to run Acid Rain, which I think is a cool ability too, but you just kind of get stuck running more in my opinion. So I hope Maniac gets a touch up at some point. I really would like to see what that path looks like in 2026. For now, bit clunky. It's a bit slower than it needs to be, but I still think it fits a solid niche. Okay, Exanimate. So Exanimate, basically like just like a slightly different Wanderer, honestly, to be honest. A one that's maybe a little more risky, but pumps out a little bit more dot, at least on average. So you can see shades of, with this path, you can see shades of what turned into like Intrepid, you know, as far as stack paths or like Vanguard. You can kind of see it too with like Ravager or just Hellion in general, just like being under, getting extra buffs, being under a certain amount of health. So you can kind of see what they did with the idea of Exanimate kind of in the future, and put it onto paths that were like, you know, pretty damn strong. I like Exanimate. I think one of my favorite things about it is punish hitting rank 3. Like that's really cool. I really like the skill set that you can run with him because it's easier. You can fit Acid Rain easier. You can slap rank 3 easier, and it sets up for like Necrosis. Exanimate, you know, it gets caught in it gets kind of caught in the Lashes gift loop a little bit if you've played it at all. I think Exanimate probably loses a couple of points because I think that these 5 are what you'd run on Exanimate like damn near every time. I don't think he has a lot of flexibility to run like Undying or something along those lines. I think he's Flagellant, you know, is kind of a off tank sort of like half healer, half stress healer. At least like he can be in the team, but I don't think Exanimate kind of opens up to that. But I do like Exanimate. I do think it's a fun path. I play it more often than I play Wanderer, just because again I like being able to hit rank 3 with punish. I like that he can pump out more dot, at least if he's under 50%. Under 50% for him is still like 30 health or whatever it is, right? So it's not even like you're playing around with Death Store or anything like that. I like Exanimate. I'm gonna put it like top of B right here. I think it suffers from like more being one of his best abilities that you're not able to run. And again, he doesn't have access to like Undying or Suffer or anything else to help out the team. But if you want a guy that just kind of sort of does his own thing, I think it's Wanderer adjacent, but also it's different enough to make it pretty good. It does a lot of damage. You know, especially once you get into Necrosis and stuff like that, you can play more for damage for those aggressive punishes, those aggressive necrosises, maybe more than Wanderer does, and I think that's its strength. I think it's one of those paths that almost feels like you know, Scourge and Wanderer very much feel like Flagellant paths in their strength, in the sense that they're very, very strong. Exanimate almost feels like a good path for like another hero. Like it doesn't feel like he's like on another level, like maybe the other Flagellant paths do. But like I said, I like Exanimate. I run it more often than I run Wanderer. And I think it's a good path that has some pretty damn good put out to it that maybe some people haven't seen, just because the other paths kind of take up all the glory. So Scourge here, I'm not gonna to waste time just talking about it before I put him anywhere. I think Scourge is the single best path in the game. I don't think it's even really close. I think even I wouldn't say he quite deserves to be in his own tier, but I think even within the own tier, I think he's just absolutely insane. That Deathless is one of the best single abilities in the game. It's insane that it even honestly exists in a way. The Lashes gift buff that he got not that long ago. Obviously, Scourge did not need that because it was already a fucking insane path. But what I will say is I think So I think this is what I'm assuming. I don't have any insider information or anything, but I think there's sometimes you look at a path, like when I was talking about Maniac, and you say, okay, this needs a buff. How do we want to buff it? I think Scourge, the lashes change was probably the other way, where somebody was like, hey, I have this idea of an ability that heals, it lowers stresses or lowers stress, but it also can give really good value if he's playing into the toxic tokens. So if you don't want to play into the toxic tokens, it lowers your stress so that you're less likely to go toxic. And if you do play into it, then you get extra buff with the chances of handing out that crit tokens. And that is a really cool idea. And it kind of only fit on Scourge, right? Exanimate needs its lashes. Wanderer lashes is perfectly fine. Maniac needs its lashes. So it's kind of like, well, Scourge is kind of the only place we could put this. And it is a cool buff, right? At the end of the day, Scourge is a really cool path. I think Flagellant of any hero is allowed to be maybe a little bit stronger because he has death roaming around. So that is something you have to worry about. So that is just sort of a natural pushback to any kind of like strength that he has. Scourge, obviously, since it came out, has been an insane path. It definitely like it's now a stress healing path that is one of the best healing paths in the game, while also being one of the better like stress healing paths in the game, while also being one of the best like tanks in the game, right? Good example of a path that like I could not put this in the same tier as anything other than these three paths. It just wouldn't feel right. It feels like a chasm in between Scourge and some other paths. So hey, at the very end of the day, you know what? Yeah, Scourge pretty busted. Yeah, but he's cool. It's a cool, great lore. Death is pretty cool, and he's a fun character. So if you're gonna have any character, if you're gonna have any path be the strongest of the game, hey, you know what? This is probably the perfect one for that. All right, listen up, simps. It's grave robber time. So, starting with the Wanderer. Boy, Jack of all trades, master of none. I think there's a difference between Jack of all trades, meaning they do everything well, versus Jack of all trades, master of none, kind of really doesn't do anything well. I'm not a fan of Grave Robber, of Wanderer Grave Robber, because I just don't think it does anything that's interesting. If you want to play her like Thrown Dagger style, I think Deadeye is better for that. If you want to play her Lunge, I think you can just do Venomdrop. You can play Venomdrop and just do the same thing, or obviously you can play Nightsworn. Yeah, I don't. Her dot put out is okay, but it can be better with Venomdrop. The Lunge, I do like the Lunge ignoring tokens. But if you really want to do Lunge, just play Venomdrop. It does, it's at least similar Lunge to Wanderer, but it has way better put out with dots with Venomdrop. I did not necessarily mean to do this, but I put, when we were going through this in the alphabetical order, I did the best path in the entire game in Scourge, and right after that, I think Wanderer Grave Robber is the worst path in the game. I think it's peak. What is wrong with like Wanderers, and although the reworks I think did a great job of putting this kind of to rest. The question with the old path system was that why would you ever play Wanderer when like what unique identity do the Wanderers have that is worth playing once you have the other paths unlocked? And I think with like Flagellant, I think with Crusader, I think that they are different enough to have a bit of an identity. I don't think Grave Robber, Wanderer Grave Robber has that. I mean, literally pick an ability and there's a path that does it better. I think the maybe the exception would be if you put her in the front and you want her to dodge tank, because the Absinthe is pretty good. And like if you did that, I still would probably rather recommend playing Deadeye. Even if you put her in like rank 2. Like I think she has a path that's better in every way. The only thing I can think of is if you have her in the front and dodge tank, but even then, man, I think that's like probably Act 3 bot. I think that's so niche. I think Grave Robber is, I think she's a good example of the old path system where she just doesn't have anything that makes her unique. I think all of the other paths play better. I would like to see her get something maybe, but I don't really know what that would be. I don't think she's a bad hero, but I think Wanderer Grave Robber to me is, I think it's the path that like needs the most. There's just almost no reason to play it once you unlock the paths. So next up is Deadeye. So I think Deadeye doesn't get the love that it deserves. I talked about this in my 5 common DD2 opinions that I disagree with. where I sung the praises of Deadeye, and the reason, basically, I mean, I'm sure you know why she doesn't get the love that she deserves, and that's because people think it's a worse Sharpshot, and that was what that part of that video talked about, is me highlighting Deadeye's strength. So Deadeye's strengths, for example, Thrown Dagger, if you compare it to Pistol Shot, Thrown Dagger only does 1 less damage on a crit, but it has much higher crit chance. So if you look at that, it is, I don't know, if on average, I don't know the exact math, but on average, it is just as strong, if not stronger, than Pistol Shot. Obviously, Sharpshot has double tap, which is an insane ability on its own, but Deadeye has Absinthe. So basically, Deadeye, because she's going to be sitting in rank 4 in all likelihood, she's not going to get hit very often, and when she does, she has Absinthe for it. So she basically doesn't need to be healed ever, and having your Vestal or your Plague Doctor or whatever basically be able to completely ignore one hero for 99% of the time, I think goes a long way, especially with something like Vestal that like has the cooldowns. So I think Deadeye strengthened that. I think back to when I was talking about Duelist, the single strongest thing you can do in this game is have a dodge plus, and she has a dodge plus and a taunt, at least when you master it. So to be able to likely dodge whatever you need her to dodge, I think Deadeye is really underrated. So Thrown Dagger plus, the ramping 2 speed, I think, is really good. Another point I made in that video is if she's consistently going first, you can give her a combat item, and knowing that she will go at the beginning of the round. So if you give her a healing salve, giving her a smoke bomb, something like that. There's a lot of little things about Deadeye that I think people just don't think about, and I get it. Sharpshot's more of the flashy path, although it is similar. It's more of the flashy path, so I think people tend to look at that. But I think Deadeye doesn't get the respect that it deserves. It's definitely it's more one-dimensional of a path a little bit, I think, rather than Sharpshot, because Sharpshot, you're kind of going back and forth between like Pistol Shot, double tap, and like Highway Robbery. Deadeye is mostly just Thrown Dagger. Keep in mind, if you're able to have good relationships, though, if you can have Thrown Dagger, I don't know, heal somebody 10% with an amorous relationship, or with Respectful add a strength token, that can really snowball your team. Although, unfortunately, it does go the other way, where if you happen to get a negative relationship and it adds a blind onto Thrown Dagger, that can cause a lot of problems. So there's a very snowbally effect to Deadeye. Again, it's kind of one-dimensional in the sense that Thrown Dagger is like the best ability that you're gonna be pressing most of the time. That also means she doesn't need a lot of mastery points. So I think there's a lot to Deadeye to love, and I think it doesn't get the love that it deserves. So I'm gonna put it really like kind of like top-ish, middle-ish of A. I think it works in the right scenario. I think it works with like Maniac, Punish Plus, adding combos. I think it works in a Holy Lance type team. I think it works with a Cultist. You know, some a little bit of a downside would be to that is you really do want her hitting into combo pretty much every round. Although 30% crit chance not into combo is still really, really good. You would like her. It feels like a bit of a meh turn if she doesn't. So a little, again, the one-dimensional hurts her a little bit, but I think Deadeye is really strong. It is a great rank 4 pick if you can throw it in any team that combos. So again, back to when I was talking about the A tier being some of my favorite paths, some of the paths that I play a lot. I think Venomdrop's a good example of that. Venomdrop is a very, very consistent path. The flashing daggers, being able to apply blight in the middle, I think is really good. There's a couple different ways you can play her. Back to when I was talking about Wanderer, Grave Robber. If you want to, you can like Shadow Fade. You can do like Shadow Fade, Lunge, Flashing Daggers, for example. Or you can just have her spam Flashing Daggers. Personally, I just throw her in rank 4 and I just have her Flashing Daggers until she can get a, so she can Dead of Night with a corpse, and then just do it like that. I don't play into the piercing element and the extra blight element a ton. Although admittedly, that's just sort of preference. Just because I'd rather have her just like spam it on average and then, you know, get stealth when she can. So I really like Venomdrop. I'm going to throw it in A right here. Just because it may be, like, it's very consistent, but I think it's another good example of like an A tier. Like, it's not going to straight up carry your team in the same way that like a Banneret will. But it will fill its niche very well, and it will pump out a lot of dots, and it has a high ceiling as far as the amount of dots that you can pump out. It's a fairly straightforward path, but still, back to when I was talking about Deadeye, still having access to repartee, I think is really nice. This is probably the easiest path, or one of the easiest paths at least, to play with Glint if you want to. If you know that you're going to be fighting a boss and you have an extra mastery point, to be able to master Glint in the Dark and get that Execution 3 is really, really nice. So I love Venomdrop. It's one of the best like dot pumper outers of the game. Just very high dot in general, whether you play a ton into the stealth or not. They should be playing into it a little bit. So closing off Grave Robber here is Nightsworn. Flashing Daggers hitting 3 is interesting. And then Repartee being able to taunt somebody else, I mean, that's the only ability in the game that does that. I think that's pretty cool. I think that they are interesting kind of B tactics, where like, you know, Shadow Fade and Lunge would be kind of your A tactic. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a huge Nightsworn guy, and I realize that this is bias. Okay, so hear me out. So even when I played other games, I don't like when things only do damage and that's it, and there's not a lot of utility. Yes, I know it has Repartee, but like Repartee taunting, I mean, it's fine. It's not. I don't love it. I mean, it's okay. Yeah, you throw it onto your chaplain or you throw it onto your, you know, carcass or whatever. I think it's fine. I mean, I don't think it's like great or anything. Same with flashing daggers. I like the flashing daggers, especially if you can get like on hit in any way, whether it be on hit negative tokens, sparkle ball, or you can get on hit like dot in any way. I think it's cool. But when you start running into like size 2s and size 3s, size 4s, it starts to feel kind of bad. I think Nightsworn is just one of those paths where there's a lot of situations where you feel shitty. So again, if you're going flashing daggers, if you're going against size 2s, it feels shitty. If you're going against block tokens, I think it feels shitty. I understand why they made Nightsworn Lunge not go through block tokens, but I don't like it because I think she just kind of turns into like almost deadweight in like the Tangle or in any boss fight where they get a block token. I know that the extra 50% damage in stealth, you know, I know it offsets the block, but man, it's like what, 7 to 11? 7 to 11 on Lunge Plus. Man, if you low roll that or you get weakened or you blinded, although, you know, obviously it shouldn't be happening because she's stealth quite a bit, I think that feels so shitty. So to me, the highs are not worth the lows. I recognize that I have never been a Nightsworn guy. Okay, so if you're a big Nightsworn guy, you are welcome just to be like, man, this guy's opinion sucks, and I would totally understand it. I'm not a huge Nightsworn fan. I think it's okay, but I think it's too one-dimensional to do the damage that it wants to be doing. I might just be a hater. I don't know. I don't like things in games that only do damage because it feels to me the low feels so bad. She gets a weak token or she gets a blind. To me, it's not worth the highs. But that's just me. I've had plenty of people flame me over that, and probably deservingly so. I'm just not a huge Nightsworn guy. I just can't get myself to be a big Nightsworn guy. Welcome to day 2 of recording. Okay, so we have Wanderer Hellion. So Wanderer Hellion's not for me a ton. While I do think that her abilities are really strong, like Bleed Out is a really efficient ability. Obviously, Howling End is good. Raucous is a crazy good ability. I just love her paths more personally. I don't think there's a ton of reasons to play Wanderer once you unlock the paths. I do like the Breakthrough a lot. Breakthrough Wanderer does give you access to the quickest Howling End, where you can break through on turn 1 and then Howling End. So that's pretty cool. I'm always wary about putting a lot of power. A lot of the power that's in a path being gated behind like having to hit 3 targets. Just because there's a lot of situations where you have like size 2s, obviously, and then you have like bosses, and it really kind of like, you know, it kind of sweeps the legs out from under the path sometimes if you happen to do that. Obviously in boss fights you can kind of take it out, so I'm not hurting it too much for that. But it's more like you don't know what mash you're coming up with, right? If you're coming up to a double size 2 mash, it's kind of like, okay, well, you know, Breakthrough's still going to hit 2, but it is going to slow down kind of your power a little bit. I know a lot of people, based on me talking to, is they like Wander Hellion. It's really just not for me, just because I love her paths so much. I'd really just rather play her paths pretty much in every situation. I'm going to put her around like 47. I'll give her a bump because of the quick Howling End, which is really nice. And again, it's not like that her abilities are not strong. Like Hellion as a character is strong. It's just that I would rather use Bleed Out or Raucous on like another path. That's just me personally. Maybe I'm just a hater. I like Hellion in general. Wander, it's kind of just not for me. It's all right. It's solid path in general, but I think it's because I'm judging Wanderers differently. I think it's probably one of those paths or one of those heroes I'd rather run the paths, but that's just me personally. The next path is Ravager. So Ravager is a really interesting path in the context of Darkest Dungeon in general. So Red Hook has always kind of toyed with the like high risk, high reward, either like play styles or trinkets or like paths in DD2 or whatever. You have like Martyr Seal in the first game where you get extra buffs like being on Death's Door. So in the context of DD2, you kind of had, so it was like kind of Intrepid, right? So Intrepid, this high risk, high reward where it's like you get these extra buffs if you dodge, but also on the next hit you take more damage or whatever it might be, minus don't resist, whatever it is. And I think with Duelist, it was kind of like people are already kind of wary on Duelist anyways, and then you add in the fact that dodge pluses can be kind of inconsistent, and also her health isn't, she's in the tankiest character in the world, so people kind of push back, I think, on Intrepid. I don't think a lot of people have played Intrepid. And then next you have like Vanguard, right? So Vanguard, Courageous Abandon does a lot of damage, but it lowers his max health for the fight. Or you have Riposte that like lowers dot resist, right? So, and I think there's going to be a certain ceiling on any damage-based Man-at-Arms path because Man-at-Arms is just so good as a tank. And with him being a starting character, I think there's so many people that just continue to want to. He's kind of like the quintessential tank, right? So they want to bring him as that. So there's a bit of a ceiling on that. Then you have like Arsonist. Arsonist, another high risk, high reward path, but it's very inconsistent in the sense of because the dots do damage, because it's the burn that does damage, there's a lot of inherent risk on that just based on the lack of control. So Ravager, all of that to say, Ravager is they kind of took everything that they learned from all of the other paths and put it into Ravager and finally had it be this kind of risky path that people, at least probably more people than any of the other paths, are willing to play. So what did they kind of learn from that? What did they learn from Arsonist, Intrepid, Vanguard, and stuff? So from Arsonist, it's if there's anybody between Arsonist and Intrepid, if the average player is going to play a path like this, that's like very risky, because players want consistency, right? So relying on dodge pluses is only going to be consistent to a certain point, and relying on self burn, there's only so much you can do about that. It's very easy to hit Death's Door. It's tough to control in the same way. But Ravager being flat damage means that you have a little more control of it, and she does like the flat damage to herself, right? So Ravager is this kind of everything that they learned from all the paths into Ravager. And I think one thing that the community and also Red Hook kind of learned in general is people are not going to play risky paths unless they have a lot of control. I think Ravager, you have so much control over her being low or going to Death's Door that it's almost like it's not even really a risky path. No, I'm specifically talking about like bloodlusting to Death's Door and getting Execution 3 and getting extra damage. So I'm specifically kind of talking about that there. One cool thing about Ravager also is that it's kind of like a Wanderer. It's like a Wanderer adjacent, where like you can play her normally as you would play Wanderer, but with some extra safeness if she hits Death's Door with like Adrenaline Rush, and one that just heals on kill. So it's kind of cool that there's like two paths of it, where it's like you can play fully into the path where you're using Bloodlust and things like that, and also you can just play it as like Wanderer, but she heals on kill. So Ravager is an insane path because yes, it's a risky path, but also it's so risky that like it's almost not risky if you like if you know how to use it, because Bloodlust being a free action, right? So that gives you dodges right off the bat, or dodge pluses if you mastered it. And it's the free action element of Bloodlust is like if you were to Bloodlust to Death's Door and be like, oh, I'm gonna this enemy's got 20 health, I'm gonna Howling End and I'm gonna try to kill it. And the roll, let's say the damage roll is like 18 to like 24, and you're like, okay, I don't want to risk obviously hitting to Death's Door and Howling End this guy and him not dying. Like it has to be a guaranteed kill. You can just Bloodlust to Death's Door, and then if you get kind of gun shy about the numbers, about the roll, you can either just pass a turn, which will heal her off of Death's Door, or you can use Revelry if you're running it. So it's like there's really not a lot of risk to it. Like to me, at least, you might as well run the Bloodlust version of it, because like you're gonna put her kind of low, but she's probably gonna get a kill off of it. Like just don't press the button if you're really worried about it. And then even if she doesn't, you still have like the dodge or the dodge pluses to keep her safe. So I don't I don't even think the bloodlust on, or the adrenaline rush, sorry, on her is like necessary. Although obviously, like, personally, but that's obviously because like I know roughly the damage numbers of all the enemies in this game. Like I realize that I'm speaking from a soapbox of having so many fucking hours in this game. But yeah, Ravager. The long story short, Ravager is a ton of upside for like it's almost like fake. It's almost like fake risky because you have so much control over it that it's like fake risky. Like it's kind of like, you know, doing something risky, but like you're doing it in bubble wrap. Like you're so safe, it's like probably not nearly as risky. So I'm putting her in S. I think she absolutely deserves to be an S. Because it's just Howling End does so much damage. It's got good crit chance. It's easy to get her to death's door. Like you're only gonna press Bloodlust, or if you can get a kill, you're only gonna press it. It doesn't press itself. You're only gonna press it if you know you're gonna bounce off of it. And even if you do miscalculate in your head, you have Raucous or you have a pass heal to be able to bounce off of it there. And even if you're really worried about it, you can just run Adrenaline Rush, and then, you know, if she does get hit the death's door, it's gonna get rid of the dots. Like this, it's such a safe path. I think if you like play it a little bit and understand kind of how it works, that it's really not. It's not like a risky path. It's got so many guardrails on it. I like it better as the high risk, high reward path because of that. But playing it as a wanderer like adjacent also is really good too. But I think Ravager is insane. It's got the guardrails to it. If you're playing into Bloodlust, which I would recommend at least, you know, maybe if you have 5 memories and Bloodthirsty, maybe it's a little bit too much of a risk, which I would get, but Ravager played at its like at its riskiest is an insane path, and it's really not nearly as like unsafe as it seems. So Berserker is next. Let me say another version of a path that when I was defining the A tier, I was talking about some of the paths in here are the ones that are like kind of my favorite. Maybe they're not like the S, you know, they're not like solo carry kind of paths, but I really really like them, and I think Berserker is a good example of that. Berserker, if you're able to hopefully you're able to use breakthrough like a little bit. It's not like you have to spam it like every single round like you'd want to do with like a Holy Lance. But hopefully you're getting some value out of it, right? If you think like evangelists, in the cultist fight, the frontline cultists, like you're able to break tokens and you're able to add bleed at the same time. So that's really good to if the enemy starts with block tokens or whatever, you're able to get through them like really quickly and also apply a bleed. So I really like Berserker for that. The one issue would be like in Confessions, just because Confessions, I think you need more like a quintessential sort of like taunt tank, at least for the act bosses a little bit more. And there's none of them really. I mean, Man-at-Arms can kind of do it with Rampart, but it's tough to dance with like one of those like true taunt tanks. You know, Flagellant doesn't have any movement. Crusader doesn't have any movement, at least in the front. So it can be a little hard to maybe get it played at its most efficiently. I think she's best with like a Highwayman. Somebody that's able to like run away would be another good example. Somebody that's able to both stay in a rank if they want to for a round, depending on the fight, or also move forward and give Berserker the ability to use breakthrough more. So I think in Kingdoms she's really really strong because you don't need that kind of quintessential tank in the same way. Although even if you're in Confessions, you can throw a Crusader, throw a Flagellant, and then just have like Jester in the team and have Jester be able to move Hellion back into rank 2 so that she can use breakthrough. You can do the breakthrough dancing in like rank 2 and 3 also. It's a little more rough just because although you do get Bleed Out, and you have Bleed Out and Howling End in rank 2, but you don't get either of them in rank 3. So it can be a little slow, although if it bleeds is fine too. I think this is really where Berserker is really where the adrenaline or the bloodlust, sorry, pops off, because you can give her 3. When you get the 3 winded tokens, that's when you can get the speed, strength, and crit, and then you can use it for Howling End. Howling End is a crazy, crazy ability. It has the benefits of Cause of Death, meaning like it pops the dots. It turns the dots into instant damage, like same with like a Scourge, or same with like a Sepsis, sorry. But also it has the benefit of normal Howling End, where it has a base damage also, and it has high crit. Absolutely insane ability. So Berserker is really, really, really strong. I do think Breakthrough is like kind of a must to run if you want to get the max value out of her. You can easily just kind of like sit her in rank 1 also and Bleed Out, but it doesn't give you the flexibility nearly as much to be able to like Howling in and just pop any enemy. I think Berserker works fine on its own. It's not a like, one thing you could say about Aggressor is Aggressor kind of needs burn in the other team to really get full value out of. I think Berserker is more than fine on its own to just apply bleed like that. I don't think you need to run like a full bleed team to get value out of Howling End, although obviously it helps. But I think Berserker is she's a plug and play path or a hero that you would think maybe needs some more synergy as far as like other people setting up bleed. I don't think she really does. So there might be a little bit of bias here, but I'm gonna have her in like high A because I think her like top end as far as like the effectiveness that she can bring is just so good, and she can set everything up herself while also benefiting pretty well from any other bleed heroes or trinkets or whatever or setups that you might have. So I really like Berserker. I think you should definitely give it a try in a like something like Rampart, Man at Arms, right? Something where you're able to dance around with one or two. It doesn't have to be with ranks 1 and 2. It doesn't have to be every round. But obviously, the more often that you're able to do it, and depending on the fight, you're able to the more you're able to do it, the better. I think Berserker is really strong. Kind of like I would say borderline S. I think in the right situation, the right scenarios, meaning like in kingdoms, with maybe a little bit of setup also. I think she's probably in that S tier, but I'm gonna knock her down to A a little bit. Just because it's a little tougher to get in confessions, but yeah, Berserker, if you haven't tried the new Berserker, I think it's such a glow up. I think they did such a fantastic job taking a path that wasn't that great in practice before, but in practice is just so good now. Good old Carcass. So if you didn't play the old Carcass, it was extremely strong, but only at like one thing. So it was your definition of like a big dumb tank, where that's really all it did. Like it didn't, although bleed out is a much stronger ability than people think. It didn't do any damage, and it didn't really give her access to any of the fun stuff that kind of Hellion has. So I think it was one of those almost like cult classic paths where like probably the average player didn't play it a ton, but the people that did were absolutely loved it because it sets up. It's kind of like having one boring path so that the other three paths that you can pick can just be whatever the hell you want. Like Carcass was just so good, and there's still some truth to that, right? Like Carcass is one of the last like kind of as close as you can get to like a spam tank, a spam taunt tank that like existed quite a bit in old DD2, but not nearly as like they took away the access to taunts quite a bit with some of the reworks, which I think is probably the good move. Carcass still has it quite a bit, so between this and like old Poet, they just did so little damage. So again, I don't think they were probably super fun for the average player. So I understand, and you saw what you see with Poet too, where Poet got some offensive elements, and I think and Carcass got some offensive elements also to specifically like the Howling End, right? To be able to, I understand. Like it's just one of those games where you can only when you really pick 4 heroes and pick 4 paths, you want everybody to do at least like a little bit of damage, like a little bit. And which old Carcass didn't do nearly as much, but new Carcass is absolutely insane. So Carcass, another good example of path. I don't feel comfortable putting anything anywhere else because it is still the true tank that it was before. It really didn't lose a lot. Maybe Raucous being a little less spammable, but it's also such a crazy ability now. It really didn't lose that much. I understand why they gave in like some extra damage, like an offensive element to it, but why they gave such an offensive element in Howling End? I think to me they went it's kind of overboard. Carcass does so much fucking damage while also at the same time being like one of the best tanks that exists in this game. This path is insane. Like I said, I understand why they added some offensive element to it, but why they added so much, I don't know. And then they added later, when it was still in the beta, they added it turns block into block pluses. So let me give you an example. So with the winded, you can do a couple things with the winded tokens. So you rack up the winded tokens, and you can either sit on those, which I think is really cool with Carcass. You can sit on them with like toe to toe, sorry, and still do a spam taunt thing, which again I'm surprised even still exists kind of in this game. Or alternatively, you can convert them into a lot of damage and block plus, or block to block plus with Howling End. Or option 3, you can put Winded onto the enemies, and I think compared to Howling End is so underwhelming. It's kind of surprising they're in the same path. So I like the idea of adding Winded onto enemies. I like that idea. I think it's really interesting, and you can do some interesting stuff. Like kind of bullying size 2s with those. Uh, but compared to Howling End doing the damage that it does and converting block into block pluses, it's like, would you rather have $1 or $100? Like, the breakthrough just falls so short of just the rotation of getting winded and then Howling End. This this is another great example of a path. I don't feel comfortable putting this in a path or in a tier with anything other than the 3 that it is. Like, Carcass is just absolutely insane. You just get winded tokens, Howling End fucking blows something up. It's a tank path that does a shit ton of damage too. It is crazy to me. I understand that it needed to do some damage. I don't know if this needed to be another like borderline damage path. I don't know. Carcass is fucking insane though. But hey, it's a great path, and honestly, it's pretty fun. It's pretty cool, but it's just like, you know, back to when I was defining the paths, I said, why can it do X while also doing Y, while also not really having any discernible downsides? Why can it tank so well? One of the best tanks in the game, while also doing a shit ton of damage with Bleed Out and with Howling End, while also not really having any discernible downsides either. Carcass is a great example of that. Great path though, but man, it is, yeah, it's kind of crazy how effective of a path it is. Wanderer Highwayman is next. So Wanderer Highwayman, I think is a good example of just a good path and a good hero, but it just doesn't really have a lot that differentiates itself from its other paths. I think you pretty much, once you have the paths unlocked, I think you're probably better off either going a more tanky version with Rogue, or a bleed version with Yellowhand, or a backline option with Pistol Shot. I don't think there's a ton of reason to run Wanderer Highwayman, to be honest. What I will say though, I really like the Grape Shot on Wanderer Highwayman. So upgrading it to lower speed, it's the only like spammable minus speed ability in the game. And the fact that it hits 2 targets too, like, you can really do some interesting stuff with that. I don't think it's interesting enough to like pick the path. Personally, back to kind of when I was talking about Hellion, I would rather specialize Highwayman, I think, in pretty much every scenario. That's just me personally. I really like that Grape Shot, but I also really like Yellowhand, and I really like Sharpshot, and I really like Rogue. So Highwayman in general, strong hero. Grape Shot, you know, pretty strong ability, but I think you're probably better off playing other paths personally. I'm sorry if there's any Wander Highwayman lovers out there that I'm kind of disrespecting a little bit. Again, it's not that it's a bad path, it's just that I had to judge Wanderers kind of weird in this, and I just like the other paths better. I'm going to say the same thing with Yellowhand, but if you're interested in listening to me talk about Rogue and Yellowhand a little bit more, in my 5 common DD2 opinions that I disagree with, one of the opinions that I disagreed with was that Highwayman's paths are too similar to each other. And I think there's some truth to that. Basically, the gist is, I think there's some truth to that because Duelist Advance into Point Blank is just such a like efficient rotation that there's going to be a lot of carryover from path to path. But I do think the differences that Rogue and Yellowhand bring to the table are important enough and valuable enough that I don't think the paths are too similar personally. So specifically with Rogue, it doesn't require as many mastery points. Maybe it saves you 1 early because Duelist Advance gives a block unmastered, which can save you for a little bit, whereas opposed to the other paths, if you you have to master Duelist Advance to get any sort of defensive token. So I think that maybe better than kind of people think. Does a lot of damage. I like the 3-hit Grape Shot, and I've talked about with Nightsworn Flashing Daggers and Wanderer Hellion Breakthrough. I don't like in DD2 in general. I think it's tough when a lot of a path's power are gated behind hitting 3 in some way, like meaning getting full value out of that. Because it's just, you're going to have boss fights and you're going to have size 2 fights where that's going to be minimized. But I think the difference is with Rogue, because you have a decision on whether to use Point Blank or run Point Blank or Grape Shot. So I think that helps a little bit, where it's like you don't need Grape Shot hitting 3 nearly as much because he has other power, as opposed to Nightsworn Flashing Daggers and Wanderer Hellion Breakthrough. I think is a little bit different, where that's a lot of their power is kind of in that, whereas opposed to Rogue, it's just kind of a bonus, I guess is kind of what I mean. I run Grape Shot and Point Blank personally, although it misses out on you're either missing out on like Pistol Shot or Highway Robbery, at least the way that I run it, which are 2 abilities that it's nice to have. But I like having the options, because there's some scenarios where you're in the Sprawl, or you're in the Tangle, or you're going against Cultist fights where you'd like to hit 3. and just pop those tokens. But there's also scenarios where you're going against a size 2, you know, pit fighter or something like that, and you'd rather just blow them up and push them back at the same time. So Rogue, I think, has a lot of uses. The Execution 2 is really nice, although admittedly, you know, it's one of those that you're only going to feel a certain amount of times if you're not running like Stygian where they have extra death armor or something like that. But I really like Rogue. I think Rogue is... I know that it's maybe not like the tankiest in the world, but I think it adds just enough tank to him to have some extra value in it. So I'm going to put him in like middle A right there. Put him right around Duelist, right around Crusader, because I do like Rogue, and I think it has a purpose, and I think it fits into certain team comps better. It gives him a little more... I know he doesn't have healing, you know, in the same way like a Grave Robber does, but it does give him a little more self-sufficiency in the fact that you can mitigate damage pretty easily, and then block plus is really nice. Obviously, Highway Robbery can steal him too. So Rogue, I think, is really solid. Again, I would say personally, run both Grape Shot and Point Blank for the average fight, but it's totally up to you. Either way, Rogue, maybe not the flashiest in the world in the sense that it doesn't have dots, or it doesn't have the token breaking, maybe that or single target token breaking, maybe that Sharpshot does. But overall, I think it's good. I think anytime you have a 3-hit like this, a 3-hit ability that hits 3, you're gonna have... there's gonna be really good synergy with like Sparkle Ball or like Corrupted Biogland or any other on-hit Trinket or on-hit, you know, whatever. It's gonna be really strong. So Rogue overall, middle of A, I think, is pretty strong. It's not gonna solo carry a team like maybe A is, but it's gonna... or the S tier is, but it's gonna fit in really, really nicely, and it's gonna do his job really, really nicely. Sharpshot is up next. Another one of those paths where you could probably have a pretty good idea of where I'm going to put it if you've ever played Sharpshot. So Sharpshot, it's mostly, honestly, a lot of the power of this path is in double tap, which is kind of funny considering that this double tap hasn't been around since the beginning of the game. So to be able to shred through tokens, to be able to do something like Sparkle Ball or anything else that's on hit, to be able to apply that twice, to be able to combo, to be able to have execute. I mean, absolutely one of those abilities that I mean, at least to me, I think when you first see it, you're like, okay, that's pretty good. And then you play it and you just see all the scenarios you could run into. Obviously, both can crit, one can crit. Just an absolute crazy ability. Grape Shot, although it's, you know, same with Pistol Shot, where it's pretty straightforward what it does. It just kind of does damage, but it does it really well. To be able to have the rank flexibility, to be able to... if you want to run Duelist Advance, you can do that, at least to kind of bounce around a little bit. It gives them an extra element of be able to move around with like certain teams. It's just one of those paths that is just really strong. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong at this, but at least on the surface, I think when you first see it, it's kind of like, okay, well, Pistol Shot, it does good damage or whatever, but it loses combo element of it. And you're like, well, you're not really going to be using the slice abilities, whatever. But when you play it like pretty early on, you're like, damn, this path is pretty crazy. So Sharpshot's a pretty good example of a path that like... Every path that's similar as far as Sharpshot goes is going to be compared to it. And also, it's because he's sitting in the back and has, you know, pretty decent health. It's not even like he's vulnerable in any way, you know, of running into any issues where like a cultist kind of has the self-burn element to it. There's a little bit of vulnerability there. Sharpshot doesn't have that. I would say it's within what I would call like the realm of balance, but, you know, within the acceptable parameters. That's totally just in opinion. Obviously, it's completely subjective. I'm sure some people would say it's too busted, but I don't think so, because, I mean, at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is it doesn't have dots. Like, if it had dots, or if it had some sort of, like, tank element to it, then maybe it would be off the charts. But Sharpshot is a perfect example of a path that you build your team around, a path that is going to carry in a lot of ways. And it is just a solid path. Keep in mind that comparing anything else, this is one of those paths that, like, comparing any other path to it is kind of unfair to the path that you're comparing it with. Just because Sharpshot is just so good. I really like it, really enjoyable. One of those paths that you can pretty much throw into any team as long as you have like a fellow healer or another healer, sorry. But like I said, if you've played the path, you probably understand why it's up there. Yellowhand's turn. So I mentioned it when I was talking about Rogue, but if you're interested in listening to me talk about Yellowhand or Rogue more, in my 5 common DD2 opinions that I disagree with, I talk about Yellowhand and Rogue because the opinion basically that I disagree with that Highwayman's paths are too similar. And I talk about really why Rogue is good and when you would pick it, and why Yellowhand is good and pick it. So you can check that out if you are interested in listening to me talk about more about Yellowhand. This might kind of surprise you where I have Yellowhand. I really, really think Yellowhand is a solid path. Um, Consistency in DD2 is important, or in these sort of games in general. And Yellowhand is one of the best as in the game at consistently putting out bleed. One of the issues, I guess, that you could say with the other Highwayman paths is that he can combo on riposte, but it's a 1 in 3 chance, right? Where Yellowhand is going to bleed on every single riposte, obviously assuming it's not resisted. So that is really good. I think the fact that he can lower bleed of enemies is really good because bleed is the most common dot in this game, right? Any enemy that does 2 bleed is going to do 0 after they get highway robbery. So a good example would be like the AoE attack of the Evangelist does 2 bleed. The Evangelist being the frontline cultist. So Yellowhand just has so many scenarios where it does things well. It doesn't have the burst ability since Open Vein loses the combo element where it doubles the bleed. It loses that burst ability that maybe like Wanderer or basically the Wanderer Open Vein has. But Yellowhand's ability to just pump out bleed while also doing the normal Duelist advanced point blank that you would get into, I think is really, really good. The highway robbery, when he gets +2 bleed dealt, that counts on the riposte too. So if you can just pretty easily just pump out bleed with him, it's one of the more consistent dot paths when it comes to that. So I'm gonna put him in S. I think he deserves to be an S just because it takes the normal good highwayman burst damage of like Duelist advance and point blank while also pumping out consistent bleed to, I mean, at least in theory, to every rank based on if they hit them like on the riposte and things like that. And it sets up, for things like Berserker, if you were able to have that, it sets up for things like Alchemist if you wanted to like Mag Rain or Cause of Death or whatever. It does really, really well. Just the riposte in general does really, really well with on-hit trinkets or, obviously bleed piercing trinkets or extra bleed trinkets or whatever. I think Yellowhand, it's one of those kind of similar to like a dot version of Sharpshot. It's a plug and play. Like I think absolutely Yellowhand could be your main character. Absolutely. Um, as long as you have some solid paths around it, I think it definitely deserves to be kind of like in middle of S right here. I love Yellowhand. Am I biased? It's possible I'm biased a little bit, but I think I could really sit down and justify why I love Yellowhand without saying that there's like bias in there. But Yellowhand, just such a good path. Wanderer Jester is kind of honestly another example where I would probably say you should specialize him most of the time rather than running Wanderer. I would say personally, there's not really a lot that Wanderer does maybe differently than like some of the other paths. I think Battle Ballad and Play Out moving 2 on Mastery. Admittedly, I don't really know how to use that. Maybe I'm like sleeping on that a little bit. I don't really know how to use that. Yeah, you have like Sharpshot point blank, I guess, but like really worth running that path for that. I don't know. And arguably it could be kind of detrimental depending on how you want to do it. But what I will give Wanderer Jester credit for is some of the flexibility. So you can play a sort of although maybe he doesn't have a ton that is super different from the other paths, I think his flexibility in his the ability, basically what abilities that you can run, I think is good. So everybody loves the Encore right now. That Encore is only on this and Intermezzo. If people don't want to run Intermezzo because it's kind of a risky path, then Wanderer is good for that. You can run a sort of if you want to run like either Battle Ballad or Play Out and also Encore and then also like dance around a little bit, I think that's what Wanderer is best for. So while personally I'd probably say that I think you're better off if you want to play like Dancer, I think you're probably better off going Soloist. If you want to play Caster, sort of where you're doing Battle Ballad and Play Out, I think you're better off playing either Intermezzo or Virtuoso. But there is some value in flexibility, in the flexibility of abilities that you can run. So rather than losing the Encore, like the playing Battle Ballad and Play Out is good. I love it on Virtuoso, but you do miss the like normal Encore, and obviously not having the bleed element of Battle Ballad and Play Out with Intermezzo, and like the consistency of Wanderer Jester is kind of nice. So you could probably move Jester, like Wanderer Jester up maybe a little bit, maybe the top of this tier, maybe bottom of A. Again, personally, I just like the specializing better. But I think Wanderer Jester's flexibility on the abilities that you can run, I think is valuable if you want to play like a certain play style. So I think that could be nice. So I'll bump him above the other Wanderers that we have so far for that. So Virtuoso is another one that honestly it might surprise you exactly where I put it. So with Virtuoso, it's complicated on the surface, but I think fundamentally it's pretty easy to understand once it's kind of broken down for you. So his abilities that change on this are all centered around Encore. So each ability does two things. So think like two branches. So number one, Ballad, Echoing March, Inspiring Tune, Play Out. They all do basically the same thing as Wanderer, a little bit different. That's the first branch, is they do something immediately. The second branch is what they do with Encore. So they buff a future Encore. So there's two elements of that. If you break it into that, I think it's simpler to understand. So the idea is that you ramp up, and then you Encore, and it buffs the entire team. So something would be like you would Battle Ballad on round 1, Play Out on round 2, which buffs the future Encore to give strength token to everybody on the team, other than him, I should say. All of his allies, or a block token to all of his allies. And whenever you feel like you need that Encore, you're able to use it. Whether it be to, again, just to buff a couple of like big attacks, if you have like a point blank coming up, if you have a Howling End coming up, or if you know that basically if you know that your team's going to get hit hard, but you don't really know where, that's when you would do Encore. Also, I know Encore has a use limit, but realistically in a normal fight, I mean, it takes, depending on how good you want that Encore to be, although Battle Bout and Play Out is probably more than enough to use Encore if you happen to use Inspiring Tune, or if you happen to use Echoing March also, you can get a really big Encore. Realistically, the use limit, I think, in the average fight isn't a huge deal. The closest thing would be obviously like 2-wave fights like Kyurgen or Creature Den. You got to be maybe a little careful about it. Or if you think death might be coming up, or obviously boss fights. But realistically, that's what Virtuoso is. Virtuoso's kind of purpose is to sit into... mostly I would probably say sit into rank 4, but you can have him sit into rank 3 also, and just buff like the entire team. So I know it's kind of weird. He doesn't really ever attack, and I know it's probably kind of weird to have, but I think if you can get enough value out of it and have a solid enough team around him that is able to get value out of the strength tokens or the crit tokens if it happens to give them out, I think having a hero that doesn't attack is more than worth it. It might take some getting used to. If you've never done it, it might take some getting used to. I'm going to put him middle of S up here. So this is one of those characters that, carry, quote unquote, might be a weird word because he is just like buffs the team. So it's kind of hard to carry in that sense, but he can make up for a lot of deficiencies with your team. So if you have a team that's maybe not as tanky, or you don't have a spam taunt tank, to be able to give block tokens on command is good. And to be able to give it to the whole team too. Obviously, again, if you have something like Howling End, if you have something like Point Blank, then to be able to give strength tokens to that is really, really strong. So Virtuoso is a really, really good path. I know it's kind of complicated on the surface a little bit, but once hopefully me breaking it down for a little bit has helped out a little bit. But if you have not tried Virtuoso in kind of the 5 abilities that I've said, really try him out. And once you get used to the timing on when you should Encore, or the timing on when you should add the block tokens, I think you'll see Virtuoso is really, really strong. This is another one kind of like Yellowhand. I know that probably the average player may not agree, but I believe it absolutely deserves to be up here. A little bit of bias because I do love the path. Absolutely deserves to be in this S tier though. Hey, fun fact, this is my 3rd recording session since this video is so damn long. So let's talk about Soloist. So when it comes to like Dancing Jester, so like Razor's Wit Fade to Black, or like Solo Finale, like if that's how you want to play him as opposed to like, Battle Ballad and Play Out kind of buffing the teams, I think Soloist is just Wanderer plus, really. Back to when we were talking about Grave Robber and Duelist, the single best thing you can do in this game is taunt dodge tank, right? So Solo plus giving 2 dodge pluses and 2 taunts, I mean, that's a 75% chance of the enemy attack doing nothing, which is essentially the same as the stun, right? So I know obviously it doesn't always work out like that, but on average, right? Very efficient button press. So any path that has access to that is going to be a good path, at least for that alone. He has higher damage than Wanderer Solo Finale, although it's a little slower to ramp up. But to offset that slowness, that a little bit slower than just using Solo and Finales, he gets it on all his melee damage, right? So flat damage is really good in this game. Anytime you should see flat damage, there should be kind of a switch that flips in your head that says that that's really efficient. So, for example, something that to do 5 damage. So if he gets 1 miss, he gets +1 damage on all melee abilities. So that's just off of 1 miss right there. If you were to do that, if you were to get that same value on an ability that did 5 damage, percentage-wise, it would take 20%. It would be 20%, basically. So you would need to get, like, Gnarly Knucks or Sharpness Charm or something like that, which isn't super hard. It's not like it's super rare or anything. But finding an entire trinket for it versus dodging a single time, very, very efficient. Anything that gives you flat damage. So you can still play him like Inspiring Tune. You can still run him as a stress healer. Although, if you can avoid it, I would say you want to play fully. Soloist is one of those where you want to play fully into it, at least in my opinion. Another thing, too, that maybe you don't think of if you haven't played it, or even if you have played it, is he gets the melee buffs on miss. So in your head, at least in my head, when I first started playing it, that's tied to solo, right? Because that's a way of giving him dodges. It works with if they miss him through blind, it works also. So Fade to Black, Razor's Whip Plus gives a dodge. That can give him a stack also. Or if you have a blind in some other form, or if you have like the combat start, there's advantage. You can get combat start. You can start all the blinded. So that ramps that up a little bit. It's not necessarily tied to solo adding the dodges. So there's a few different ways that he can kind of get those buffs. And then there's 2 ways that you can sort of play it. So you can play Soloist. Soloist has kind of almost like Wanderer level of flexibility, in my opinion. So you can play him as Soloist and just sit on those melee buffs, and just like Harvest, for example, is a really good ability to where you get the flat damage onto Harvest and you can hit 2 targets with it. It ramps up pretty quickly. If you haven't played Soloist, just trust me, it ramps up pretty quickly. Again, you can get a lot of value out of the melee damage, or that's like one branch, right? Or you can use it, and obviously for the finale buffs. And realistically, you're going to play like some hybrid of the two. But like depending on the fight, like if there's not a big enemy that you want to finale, that's fine. You can just sit on the Harvest and do a lot of damage like that, or do Razor's Wit, Fade to Black. It does a lot of damage. Like again, the flat melee buffs is really nice. I think Battle Ballad and Play Out are kind of baits on this path. And the reason that I say that is because, okay, you can buff your next Encore to ignore blind or ignore guard or whatever it is, right? Which is like pretty cool. But what if the mash that you're going into doesn't blind or doesn't have dodges? It's kind of a wasted ability slot. And in my opinion, Soloist has some really strong competition for his 5 abilities. And so I think Soloist is kind of more complicated on the surface than it seems. You're really just playing pretty similar to Wander, at least in my opinion. Buffing the Encore with that kind of stuff, or buffing the Finale, sorry, is nice, but I don't think it's worth a skill slot. I think this is one of those paths that would really benefit from, like, if you're running a mod or something to run all 11 skills, because then you wouldn't have to, there's no opportunity cost, right? Like, if you're going to run Battle Ballad when you only have 5 skills, that means you're taking off something, and you're going to have to, whatever 5 skills you run on any hero, you need to get, max value you can out of that. So Soloist, I really, really like Soloist. I think Soloist is good. I think, again, it has, like, Wanderer level flexibility. Definitely, I think it's worthy of, like, mid-A right there, just because the amount of things you can do with it. You can use him as Finale, or you can use him as just sitting on the melee damage. I don't think the use limit of Finale really matters that much. I think other than, like, if you're in a really long fight, then maybe. But even then, I don't think very often you're spamming, like, Finales like that. What I will say is about buffing the Finale is I do think Harvest is worth it. I think the adding Finale healing is nice. I don't think you can run both Slice Off and Harvest, in my opinion, because, again, I do think there's a lot of competition for the 5 skills. I think it's just too slow. On average, it's like a, 3 heal or 4 heal on Harvest when it hits a bleeding target, 1 per bleeding target. So to Harvest, or to Slice Off, sorry, to set up the bleed, and then Harvest off of that, it's 2 turns for like a 3 or 4 heal. It's kind of slow. What I will say is he benefits from, obviously, from having other bleeders in the team. Although he doesn't need it, he does benefit from it, and he does gives him some nice self-sufficiency to heal himself up a little bit with essentially like a proc of regen, right? Another good tip would be if you can find like a crow's feet or like a scrap grenade, something that AoE can bleed the enemy team. You can have that as kind of a self-heal in a pinch. You can crow's feet and then bleed the middle 2 and then harvest off of that for like a 8 heal or whatever it is. That's pretty good. So that's kind of what I tend to do with him. Overall, Soloist is really nice. The flexibility is really nice. The damage is higher. The Finale damage is higher than Wanderer. Takes a little harder to set up, but not really by that much. So I really like Soloist. This is a perfect example of a path that I will really fight for, and I will really stand behind. Is it S like solo carry? Maybe not, but That middle of A, I think that fits really nicely. I really like Soloist. Or with combat items also. So what I try to like to, or what I like to do is, um, Jesus Christ. So next up, as we talk about Intermezzo, if you have not played this path or you're not familiar with the path, I want you to do a little thought experiment with me. Okay, so I think most people look at this path and they see it bleeds allies and they're kind of like, I think that's too risky. It's not for me, which I totally understand. But I'm gonna ask you for a minute to kind of flip your mindset a little bit. Let's look at what the path does, and then at the very end decide whether the bleed is worth it, rather than letting the bleed be the back of your head the whole time. Just to look at the abilities itself. So if you look at Battle Ballad and Playout, so they guaranteed give you 2 tokens. You're going to get the normal strength token, the normal block token that you would get with the other paths, but with a secondary token pressed onto it. So that means a couple things. First of all, there's like a burst element to it as far as like utility goes. As weird as that sounds, like burst utility. But also it means that you don't need to use it on the same target like turn after turn after turn after turn. So really the bleed doesn't need to stack up nearly as much. And then if you look at the finale, so this is actually the highest damage finale that you can get, at least finale plus. The extra 50% that you get from bleed alongside the 50% of combo, that's pretty crazy. So you can get into you can probably get to better numbers with Soloist, but it requires a little bit more setup. You can play Intermezzo into the path as far as like the Battle Ballad Playout kind of thing, or you could play it into just like Solo Finale. You could play it as a sort of Wanderer adjacent or as sort of like Soloist adjacent if you want to also, without really as much risk as far as like bleeding the team goes. But Intermezzo, just as a Battle Ballad kind of playout bot, I still think Intermezzo is really, really good because there's a couple of things. So obviously, yes, I know the bleed element of it, which is gonna like maybe cause you an issue. It definitely can. But what I would say is it's pretty easy to offset with Vestal if you have you can AoE regen the team. It at least offsets that. And then you also have like if you think about it, this sets up for Cauterize, right? So if you want to run Runaway in this, if you have not played Intermezzo, I promise you it's worth the bleeds. Now, again, there's a certain subset of people out there that don't want to risk that at all, and I totally get it. But if you're try it out, I would say try it out. Try out Intermezzo. You can put it into some teams. It plays like normal Jester that you would pay Battle Ballad to play out. But it just has that extra element to it. Obviously, if you master the abilities, you get the kind of like gambling element of it. But at the end of the day, even if you don't get like the high rolls, quote unquote, on the Battle Ballad or Playout Plus, you're still getting 2 strength tokens or 2 block tokens per button press at the very least. And then, you add dodge pluses into there, or speed tokens in there, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So Intermezzo, I think, is a really good path. I know why people don't like it. I honestly, as I'm looking at this, one of the things I said when I was looking at this tier list is I could change anything, like based on any day I could look at, and I could probably move this around a little bit. The day that I'm looking at this now, I kind of wish I moved Intermezzo up a little bit more, because I do think Intermezzo is really good. At the very least, I think the solo finale, I think, is a good way to play him. But it just sets up the team so nicely, and if you're in a scenario where, again, you have something like Ministrations where it doesn't have a use limit, right, or Divine Comfort to be able to AoE regen the team, I think Intermezzo is a lot better than people give it credit for. I think a lot of people just see the bleed and are kind of scared off. But Intermezzo is really good. It's a very, very efficient path. If you have a good team in general, this can make up for a lot of teams' deficiencies. If you have a team that's maybe a little more squishy, adding the block tokens will basically on demand will do a lot for there. As far as this does have access to Wanderer Encore also. So if you're a really big fan of that Encore and you don't want to lose it with like Soloist or Virtuoso, as far as the Inspiring Tune goes, it's kind of it like in theory, right? You can have up to 8 stress heal. It's a weird stress heal in the context of this game, just because we're so used to like Bolster, Inspiring Cry, Crusader, right? Where you can just beginning of combat, you can use it. Intermezzo's Inspiring Tunes requires a little more setup. It's an okay ability to run, but I feel like it's one of those that you get the low end of stress heal, meaning like 1 or 2, rather than like the 7 or 8 kind of towards the high end. So the Inspiring Tune, I mean, it fits a niche if you need like a secondary stress healer. I know any change from the normal Inspiring Tune, I think, is gonna scare people off a little bit, which I get. But really, if you're feeling kind of gutsy, I think try out Intermezzo. It's worth it. And there's enough ways to kind of curb the downsides that I don't think it's a super scary path. But I think it is really strong in general, whether you do the solo finale or like the play out battle ballad kind of stuff. Everybody's favorite blind boy, Leper. So for what it's worth, I guess I'll take a minute to talk about the reworks. I think the rework did a very good job for Leper. I mean, they really took off kind of the handcuffs a little bit as far as like some of the complaints that people had about Leper. I mean, they buffed his damage across the board, right? Stuff like that. So that's really nice. Made the combat start blind a little better to play around rather than just getting blinded twice and not being able to resist it in any way. So overall, reworks I think really did good for Leper. For what I specifically for Wander, I think Wander Leper made more sense in the past just because Tempest had big damage stats, Poet had big tank stats, and then Wanderer just kind of fell in the middle. So if you didn't quite want to specialize one way, that's kind of what Wanderer was for. You can still do that. I mean, that's the purpose of the Wanderer. But truthfully, I think even more than it kind of used to be, I think you're probably better off. There's a good chance that if you're playing Leper, one of the 3 paths that other than the non-Wanderer paths work out pretty well. So I'll put him in like B here. Again, because of judging the Wanderers differently, sometimes it's a little weird to put. I do think that he has some purpose. Like if you really like the Ruin, if you really like Ruin, as far as Wanderer goes, it doesn't really transfer to the other paths in the exact same way, at least. So I think he's got some use there. Really, truthfully, I think he's one of those heroes you're better off specializing. Maybe I'm biased, I don't know, because I do like Leper's paths, but Wanderer specifically, I mean, it's fine. It doesn't do the damage of Tempest or Monarch, and it doesn't tank as well as Poet, and it's kind of like, you know, a little bit of like what I would say is like jack of all trades, master of none. Although maybe this, if you like Wanderer Leper, that's totally okay. It's totally fine. Leper's first path is Tempest. So with Tempest, Tempest got a couple different glow ups. So first of all, just because Wanderer the path got some upgrades across the board, and also Tempest is actually an interesting path now. So if you look at the old Tempest, it was just a chop bot basically with some stat changes. But now it's like it's still very similar, but to me it's a genuinely interesting path. So probably the best buff that the Wanderer Leper skills got in general, which affects Tempest, is Bash Plus. So Bash Plus giving 2 immobilizes now. Tempest gets extra damage on both Chop and Hew, which are your main abilities that you're going to be using based on the amount of negative tokens that he has, and because it's very easy with him getting the blind tokens, and with him setting up with immobilized tokens, it's really easy to stack a lot of damage on him. As far as stacking the negative tokens, also you have Intimidate, also, which adds 2 taunts. But it's a bit of a bait right off the bat, because by the time that he gets to his next turn, those taunt tokens are going to be gone, right? Because they're going to get used up. So Bash is the better way to go about it. Bash is like your main setup ability. It's honestly kind of similar to like a Take Aim on Highwayman, in the sense of basically Take Aim. You're trading your current turn for buff turns either next turn or the turn after that also. Where Tempest kind of has that with Bash a little bit, but with obviously Bash doesn't have the top end as like guaranteed crits does, but Bash is an actual useful ability where you're not completely trading your turn in the same way that you are with like Take Aim. So if you consider it kind of like that, it's similar to a Take Aim, but like a much better current turn. So Bash, I think is an upgrade early, like as early as you can, just because it sets up for damage so well. You can actually use Hew on this path now, which is pretty cool. Revenge is really nice with this path. If you have anything like Jester or any Seraph or something like that, to be able to give him extra strength tokens and turn those into a lot of damage. Tempest is really cool. And one nice thing about Tempest is if you're really sick of dealing with the blind tokens, Tempest doesn't have to deal with that nearly as much. You can run Tempest without a combo on the team, because you just use Bash to get rid of the blind. So Bash will you can swing Bash into the blind, as opposed to swinging in a Chop, where you can kind of chain blinds, where like he misses, gets another blind, misses another, gets another blind, blah blah. Bash doesn't give him extra blinds, right? So if you bash, you miss, it sucks or whatever, but he still gets the negative tokens, and he gets rid of the blind. So next turn is kind of set up to do a lot of damage. I'm putting him top of A. I would say borderline S, honestly. I think Tempest is really good now. It snowballs really hard, again, with extra damage, whether you get through quirks or through trinkets or through strength tokens or whatever. He can snowball really hard. If somebody put it at bottom of S, I wouldn't really argue with it. New Tempest is really good. Again, you just got to play it right. Just Bash is always your setup. So Bash, if you can get Strong Shackles, which is the trinket that gives an Immobilize on hit, it makes it even more efficient because you can have up to 3 Immobilize tokens. I really like what they did with Tempest, where they kept it pretty similar, but also added a lot of like interesting elements to it, and kept it at a similar power level, just with a little more of an interesting playstyle rather than just straight chopping and that's it. Oh, it is up next. So I'm gonna be honest about my bias. I am not a huge fan of the direction that new Poet is. Okay, so when I was talking about Carcass, I was talking about how Poet and Carcass were really the old past systems versions of just big dumb tanks. Like that's all they did. They didn't really have any damage options at all. At least not as like straight up damage options. Carcass has bleed out, but like it's an ability that does like 1 to 2 damage on average with the winded, right? So and even like if you look at like Man at Arms, right? If you look at Man at Arms, he still does decent damage. Like yeah, he's a big dumb meat shield tank, but he still does damage. Poet and Carcass just kind of didn't. I think the average player probably doesn't want to play a path. Again, speaking very generally, that doesn't do any damage. So I understand that Poet and Carcass likely we're going to get some offensive elements to them. But Poet got more offensive elements than defensive elements, which I think is extremely odd. So what I will say is the fact that they kept the move res and the stun resist and they put it on Withstand now, because now there's not path stat upgrades like there used to be. The fact that they kept that at all, honestly, I think is really cool. So I'm really like that. Withstand still has that, and with Intimidate now having a cooldown, the taunts on Withstand still allow him to play like he used to. But when I look at the path as a whole, all I can think of is why did he get so much offensive help? So the idea with like the offensive version, right, is you run Revenge, you get Regen, and then you can turn that Regen into crit tokens with Ruin. So yeah, Ruin has a defensive element also, but like turning block tokens into strength tokens, like who cares? Compared to turning regen into crit tokens, like the offensive element that's so much better than getting strength tokens. And it's just super weird to me why, like, I understand why he got some, but what I was thinking is when they first came out with the Poet rework, I was like, okay, I understand you want to add an offensive element to it. I totally get that. But the defensive kind of got, other than Withstand, really kind of got shafted as far as like making him a tank. Which I thought was really, really odd. So what I would have liked is Ruin, if Ruin got a better defensive element. So what I said when the rework first came out and I played it for a little bit is what if Ruin turned block into block pluses? They ended up actually giving that to Howling End Plus on Carcass, which I'm kind of surprised because I don't think Carcass needed that. While Poet maybe needs it a little bit more. So I'm not a fan of the new Poet because realistically, you have this like half... Like, you would like a little more tools defensively, but if you play it offensively, like, it's worse than Tempest. It doesn't do as much damage as Tempest, doesn't do as much damage as Monarch. So, like, I think it's fine for Leper to have a tank path because it specializes him, but, like, why would you have Poet be offensive if it's the worst offensive versions of the path that he has? Like, if you're going to play him more aggressively, you're not going to play Poet. You're going to play Tempest, or you're gonna play Monarch. So to me it's weird. I'm gonna put him in like middle of B. Again, I'm not a fan of the new Poet, to be honest. But what he does as far as what he used to do, I think is still strong because he still has Intimidate. He still has Taunt Spam at least as much as 2026 Darkest Dungeon 2 has. He still gets the stat upgrades, which is really nice. I hesitate to put Poet any higher, just because like I think it's cool, but I think it's just really odd the way that they went about the path with the rework. Am I biased? Maybe. Am I disrespecting Poet? Maybe. But I'm just not a huge fan of it. Although I do think it's solid for what it does as a tank. I might just be salty that it doesn't have more defensive elements to it. Maybe. I totally understand that that's probably a bias. But Poet, it's fine. Like it's solid as a tank path. The gap between it and Carcass, although I'm trying not to do too many comparisons, the gap between it and Carcass are pretty big, or like Man at Arms. So with Tempest, I mentioned Tempest got a very good glow up. Nobody has gotten a better glow up after the reworks than Monarch has. So Monarch, I always loved the idea of the old Monarch, the idea of you have a sort of late game / like boss slayer sort of path. I think that's really cool. Obviously, it did not work in the old iteration, and especially with Kingdoms coming out, it only being good against cultist enemies didn't quite work out. So I think for the time, I think when it came out, I think it was a solid effort. Obviously, in hindsight, it ended up being a little bit more of a ball and chain and of having to carry this heavy weight to the mountain. And even when he got there, it was the difference between it and like a Tempest really wasn't that big. I'm kind of surprised that they kept Monarch as a stacking path at all, because after the reworks with there being Confessions and Kingdoms, Confessions is like an act is like what, 2 to 3 hours maybe. A Kingdoms campaign is like 8 hours or something like that. How do you have a stacking path that is strong in both modes, because it both has to stack relatively quickly and it has to like have a high enough top end to be worth the effort. And I think with Confessions and Kingdoms being so different from each other, as far as time length goes, I think that's really tough to do. I'm impressed though, because I think they nailed it with Monarch. Because in at least in my experience, I'm not somebody who's willing to like stall for like a full round just to get a kill or whatever. But given some effort, but not a ton of effort to get stacks, usually Confessions I can do it in about a region and a half, get those 66 stacks. And in Kingdoms, it's somewhere between like 5 and 10 days. That's pretty quick. That's more than enough, or that's more than quick enough for you to get a good amount of value of it. I'm impressed that they decided to keep the stacking idea and that they nailed it. Monarch, obviously, really strong path. It's one of those things that if it is worth your time and is worth your effort to get a stacks going, absolutely, it's worth it. You're definitely going to feel the power when you get to that high level. The Purge is really cool. Purge being able to get rid of or steal positive tokens based on whether you have it mastered or not. The damage is good. Self-sufficiency with Solemnity. Monarch, very, very good. Deserves to be high up here in S. Only reason it's not a little bit higher is obviously because it does take a little bit to stack. But realistically, I think that you're bouncing on a razor's edge a little bit when you're trying to make a stacking path in a game like this, where again, it's so easy to make it either it hits max stacks really early, so it's stupid busted in Kingdoms because you get forever to get value of it, or it takes so long to get the stacking going that it sucks in Confessions. And I think they nailed that. They balance on that razor's edge perfectly. Monarch's super good in Kingdoms, super good in Confessions. Doesn't really take, if you haven't played it, it doesn't really take nearly as long as you think it does. Something like an Intimidate is a good ability to throw on him, since it's the only ability that gives him extra range. If you can get combat items, or if you can get trinkets that add a dot in some way, like the Kyurgen's helm, that can be good because dots count for those kind of kills for the stacks like that. So Monarch, really, really good, really enjoyable path also. Doesn't change a ton from Wanderer, but the changes that it does make are interesting enough. Ruin, given the ability to hand out quite a bit of damage to adjacent allies, is really cool if you decide to put them into rank 2 and want to throw that on there. So yeah, I love Monarch. Monarch's definitely one of those. If I had one run to try to nail it and try not to die, Monarch's probably in there. So absolutely love Monarch. I think they killed it with that. On to Man-at-Arms. So I'm gonna try to keep this short. I'm not a fan of Man-at-Arms in general, or Wanderer Man-at-Arms in general, and I'm gonna tell you why. This is just personally. This has nothing to do with balance. Because I think he doesn't play by the rules that other heroes have to play by. So if you look at, let's look at his rank of flexibility, right? So he has 7 abilities that he can use from the back. So either rank or rank 4. 7 of his 11 abilities. So that gives him a ton of rank flexibility, which is less common in this game because you have path systems. So it's kind of like, in DD1, you're like, okay, well, I see why Retribution could be used in the back in case you want to do backline, Man-at-Arms, blah, 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 whatever. But this is also alongside the fact that he can use Hold the Line at any time to be able to move him 3 forward if he wants to, and immobilize. And also he can manually move too, where other heroes, they don't have all of that. And another thing too is, I would probably say the single most broken ability in this game, or the single strongest ability, there's some arguments of like Scourge Deathless and things like that. I would probably argue that it's Wanderer Standfast Plus. To be able to give block pluses every turn and also taunt is, in the context of a game like this, unreal. So that was on old Bulwark. So I thought for sure with Red Hook kind of slowly taking taunts away, at least taunt spam from what the old paths were, I thought for sure that path, or that ability wouldn't even stick around. They moved it to Wanderer, which made it more accessible. I understand that because he's the starting tank, he has to be pretty strong, but he can use 7 abilities essentially in any rank, alongside manually moving 2, alongside having hold the line that can move him from the back to the front, where it's kind of like, you can't, like, he gets really good healing, self-sufficiency off of Crush. Obviously, Bolster is really good. I think Wander Man-at-Arms is stupid, because what I would say, compared to like Carcass or Scourge, so Flagellant's always, at least in my opinion, because death is lurking, like you can kind of take the handcuffs of balance off a little bit and make him really strong, because there's always that neutralizing factor. Wanderer Man-at-Arms, I think, is ridiculous. While it doesn't do the damage, doesn't have the damage element that like Carcass does, uh, it just tanks so well. He's got 2 different taunts with Retribution and Stand Fast. Both of them are crazy in the context of this game, because Retribution breaks tokens, alongside applies like on hit effects and stuff like that. Where and Stand Fast, obviously 75% mitigation on Stand Fast plus. It just, if it feels like he's almost balanced differently. I understand why he is, right? Because he's a starting character. If you don't have that really strong tank for like new players, they're gonna struggle more. So he does serve a purpose, of an important purpose. But you just look at like, if you look at like Sanctuary on Chaplain, right? Sanctuary plus, it gives 1 block and 1 block plus, but Defender gets 2 block pluses. And just like some heroes, the Chaplain, again, another good example. Chaplain doesn't have any taunts, and Man-at-Arms gets 2, and it's just, it's like he's balanced on a different level. And also, probably worse than anything, he's fucking boring. All right, great for a new player. It's a very important niche, but he's fucking boring. All right, I don't like Wander Man-at-Arms. He's stupid strong. He's one of the single, you could argue, at least before the Lashes gift buff on Scourge, I would say you could argue he's the strongest path in the game, just because of what he does. He does it so well. He still does decent damage, still has decent healing. I think he belongs in this busted tier. I try to avoid playing him at all costs, just because I don't like playing characters that don't play by the rules of the game, where like everybody's got their own, downsides. He doesn't really have any downsides, but like, he's a starter character, so I can forgive it a little bit. I'm just not a huge fan. All right, you're probably about to get some whiplash, because I was talking about how I don't like Wander Man-at-Arms. I think Wander Man-at-Arms is dumb as shit, but I really like Sergeant. So Sergeant's a really cool, unique path in this game as a backline sort of buffer that can do a lot. He still has access to Bolster, obviously a really strong ability. Echoing March Encore can also give speed to the entire team, but Bellow can do it a lot easier. So that's really cool. Retribution is a good ability to be able to give strength tokens to people that are in front of him, or crit tokens if it's lower and mastered. Really good in Kingdoms, because if a hero has any amount of fatigue, they are permanently under that 100% threshold, so there's no situations where you will not be able to give a strength token. Having guards from the back is really strong, because if you had the Man-at-Arms in the front and you were trying to, let's say he's in rank 1, you're trying to guard a rank 2, the Evangelist, for example, with their AoE hit can still hit that person, as opposed to if you were in rank 4 with Sergeant and guarding somebody in rank 1, there's not of all the abilities that hit those 2 ranks, so there's really no way to bypass that guard. So efficiency wise, you are able to get better guards. He has some stun value with Hold the Line. If you want to do that, what you can do is you can either get Strong Shackles, which gives Immobilize on hit, or you can master Crush and Hold the Line. And basically, you would Crush to give it Immobilize, and then the next turn you would Hold the Line, which would give you blocks, more Immobilize, and to be able to stun him. So that's a little more of an aggressive way to play Sergeant, although it's kind of tough because it requires either 2 Mastery points or Strong Shackles. Stand Fast, very, very strong ability. Efficiency-wise, I know it's, with it being only on 1 target, sometimes it's a little hard to get value out of it as opposed to like an ounce of prevention, but still really good if you can find a time to use it. I mean, during particular boss fights, like against the fish, that's a really good one. Command is a cool ability too, to be able to add, you combine that with like Hearthlight or something like that, Mag Rain, you're able to combo the entire team. Or even something like Grape Shot Blast, even something that hits 2, it's still worth it. There is only a small handful, I think 3 off the top of my head, of ways that you can give speed tokens to other allies on demand, which it is, again, with Lover's Glove, Duelist, Emboldening Vapors on PD, and Command Plus. So just to give you a, having somebody that you guarantee will be able to go first in the next round, that's almost as good, if not better, than the actual combo version of Command. So Sergeant can do some things that really no other path can. So if you haven't thrown Sergeant in the back and tried to, and used him to buff the team, definitely do that. And I think with things like Chaplain, with things like Aspirant, with things like Surgeon, you can run Scourge, obviously. You can run frontline healers to replace sort of what a rank 4 would normally do. Throw him in rank 4, have Sergeant do some really cool stuff. Doesn't need a ton of mastery points. Obviously, like Bolster is really nice. So I'm going to put him at like top of A. I don't think he quite has this ceiling to put him into like S because, I mean, by nature, he's a utility hero. So it's hard to like, you know, carry the team in the same way that I was talking about, like the way that I like a judge in S. But I think he's one of those heroes that does his job really, really well. And if you have him in a team comp and you're able to give those strength tokens or whatever it is to somebody in front of him that does a lot of damage, I think you'll really see just how good Sergeant is. And if nothing else, it's a really, really good stress healer. The heal in front on Crush, to be able to heal everybody in front of him, give him essentially a proc or regen, better than you might think, because it can give you get people off death's door. So although it might seem like a bit of a small heal, seem like a little weird that it doesn't become like a 3 or a 4 heal when you master it. Still a really nice ability to have, and just having a backline like pretty solid damage ability. Anyways, I love Sergeant. Sergeant's really the only Man at Arms path that I play, but I think it's really cool. It's very unique, but not in like a stupid broken way, kind of like Wander. So yeah, I love Sergeant. Bulwark is up next. So Man at Arms is kind of funny because he kind of has the opposite in my opinion, of the other heroes. So with the other heroes, it's kind of like, if you're gonna run Wanderer, you really got to be able to justify it on other heroes, because you're probably better off specializing. Like a good example would be like Sharpshot, right? Like how do you compare a Wanderer to Sharpshot? Because you're probably better off specializing into Sharpshot rather than like, not only are you playing Wanderer Highwayman, so you're trying to get value out of that, you need to get enough value that it's worth it to not play Sharpshot. Banneret is kind of the opposite because his Wanderer is so strong, where it's like, not only do his paths kind of have to be judged based on the power level of the paths, but also considering that you could be playing Wanderer instead, they have to be judged a little more harshly, in my opinion. So it's kind of weird in that sense. Wanderer Man at Arms is just so strong, and because it's a starting character, right? It's a comfort pick for a lot of people. They know they can plug it in and have a stress healer and have a really solid tank. So I think his paths are probably not going to get played nearly as much as other heroes because of that, because I think people are just going to be so comfortable with Wanderer. For what it's worth, I do like Bulwark. Bulwark's pretty cool. It's similar to Wanderer, but rather than being nearly as tanky, it's more sort of utility, where like he gets stuns, or he can knock back and immobilize. I think there's a time and a place for that. Truthfully, I think Bulwark is just does suffer from the fact that it's not Wanderer Man at Arms. I think it specializes in a way that does make him more interesting and makes him kind of a cool path, but it's not nearly as strong. So I have him as like bottom-ish of A. Back to when I was talking about Intermezzo, I could look at the tier list every day and move some stuff around. I feel like I had Bulwark kind of high. So it's cool, and it is cool for what it does, but you're getting a worse Standfast because it doesn't have the taunts to it. And you use Standfast more as a setup to be able to hold the line or Rampart, rather than use it as like a tank. So it's kind of like a different flavor of Man at Arms. I do think it's cool. The stuns are nice, especially since stuns, there's never been like a ton of stuns in this game. So to be able to like stand fast and then stun next turn, I do think the knockback and immobilize is probably kind of niche, with the exception of maybe like the Harvest Child fight. So for what it's worth, I do like Bulwark, but again, when would you ever play Bulwark over Wanderer unless you were just trying to switch it up? Like it's not, it's like that decision isn't made based on power level as much as it is like, I just want to play it a little bit differently, which is fine, but you are taking a pretty significant step down from Wanderer. For it's worth, again, I do like Bulwark. I do play it. It's more engaging rather than just pressing the same buttons. You kind of have to pay attention whether you have block tokens or not. So Bulwark, pretty cool. Always going to suffer from being a sort of tank path, but not nearly as Wanderer Man at Arms, but still a solid path. Nice thing to switch things up every once in a while. You get like close to that Wanderer level as far as tankiness goes, with a little bit more like interesting kind of side thing to it, trying to get stuns or whatever. Vanguard is next. So Vanguard is, I mean, I like the idea of it, right? The idea of like stacking. You have like, you can play it into Courageous Abandon, or you can play him as just like Wanderer adjacent that gets kind of more some interesting riposts. Back to what I said when I was talking about Bulwark is, it's a bit of a weird. Bulwark and Vanguard are both weird because you don't really pick them because they're stronger than like a Wanderer Man at Arms. You kind of just pick it to like switch things up a little bit. My question kind of would just be like, if you want a path that does damage, why the fuck are you playing the Man at Arms damage path? I think again, it's always gonna suffer because Wander Man Arms is just so strong. You really have to justify if you're gonna run anything other than that to really like, is it really worth it? Vanguard, I mean, I think it's fine for what it's worth. I think it's fine. I just am curious the type of person that really loves Vanguard because again, like if you really like a damage path, it's probably more interesting to play like a Banneret or like a Aggressor. I guess if you don't have the DLC, but even like, Tempest or Monarch. Yeah, so Vanguard's gonna go like kind of low middle B there. I could be wrong. I mean, I've never I just don't really care to play a damage main arm path, to be honest. I've played it and I've definitely seen what it can do, but I just to me it's fine. It's not super interesting. I think it's cool to have a damage path in general, just like for all the tanks. I just don't think it does anything that's like so exciting that it's worth playing, and definitely I don't think it's anything that's exciting enough to justify over Wander Man at Arms. But for that, that being said, I love Intrepid, so it's entirely possible that there's probably somebody out there that loves Vanguard but hates Intrepid for the same reason. I realize there's probably a little bit of inconsistency in the opinion, which I get. I do think Intrepid's a more interesting version of kind of like a stacked path like this. I don't know. I think Vanguard's fine. It's not my flavor. And I'd be curious to, again, if somebody absolutely loves Vanguard out there and I'm trashing it, you're more than welcome to yell at me for it. I totally get it. But it's one of those paths I don't really find myself ever falling in love with. And it's not really strong enough for me to want to play other than that. But hey, that's just me. I have my own biases when I'm doing this stuff too. So that's just like my opinion. Occultist is up next. Back when people ask me, people are like, hey, what are your favorite hero? What's your favorite hero? I tend to say Occultist. There was a survey that Red Hook did a few months back, and that's what I said. Because for me specifically, I think I value things differently because I obviously have so many hours in this game. I value heroes who play very different from each path, where because it allows me to play the hero more often and feel like it's fresh versus like a wanderer versus like a wanderer adjacent. That's not to say that what I'm saying is the best by any means, but just for me personally, I value big change from path to path, and I think Occultist definitely has that. For Occultist Wanderer, it has a couple interesting elements. I mean, the weird plus giving stealth is interesting. There's not a ton of value into it. You can run it with Grave Robber, you can run it with Runaway. It's okay, but and what I will say also is it could actively be harmful because you don't want to stealth your tank, right? So if you have Man at Arms taunting, or if you have Flagellant taunting, you don't really want to stealth them. So it could actively harm. I don't think there's a ton of reason to play Occultist Wanderer. I think, again, back to what I said about his paths being different, I think you're probably better off specializing him in some way. Although what I will say is the Malediction is really cool, the constant comboing. That can make some really interesting stuff in boss fights. So there is a couple reasons to play him, but I don't think it's quite enough. If we were to get a stealth hero down the road or, whatever, maybe it adds into that a little bit. It feels like, you can set up for like Survivor Hearthlight, right? Or something along those lines, but it just feels like it's a lot of effort where you're missing out on regen of Warlock with Weird Plus, or you're missing out of dot heal of Aspirant, or you're missing out of removing the negative tokens of Ritualist. It just is, it's kind of the weird specifically is kind of like the worst version. And it could actively be harmful. So not a huge Wanderer Occultist guy personally. It's just because I love the paths a lot. I do like the stealth idea of Weird, but I just don't think there's quite any way to get like a ton of value out of it. Ritualist is up next. So Ritualist is just one of those paths that is really, really good at what it does. To be able to apply debuffs, to be able to constantly get unchecked power tokens. It has the highest ceiling, I guess, when it comes to unchecked power tokens. Weakening Curse, being able to give him unchecked power tokens per target basically that the enemy is attacking. You can work around that with Riposte also. You could give that debuff to somebody like the Knight in the Tangle and then hit into it a couple times. Every Riposte up until through like the Knights in this example, the next turn. You can get value off of that. Obviously anything, if you're in the Sprawl, you go against a lot of the guys that hit all four, you can get really good value out of that. Alongside just applying the debuff in general, the weak in general. He gets piercing through unchecked power tokens, so you can either get the unchecked power tokens and pop them with something like a Malediction, pop it with something like a Weird, or you can kind of just sit on them and let them get piercing through that. Ritualist, I think, is a really good path. I would have liked to, personally, although I understand why they got rid of it, I would have liked to see Ritualist still have a bigger like a range of healing. Basically, the with old Ritualist, the top end was a little bit higher. I believe it went up to like 66% or something along those lines as far as the max heal that it could do without crits. I would have liked to see them keep that just because I understand there's a lot of people that probably don't want to play Occultist because obviously the 0 crit lead. But I think having a little bit of a safer version I think is cool. I wouldn't mind that being on like a Trinket. But for what it's worth, because they opened up, like old Ritualist didn't get a lot of unchecked power tokens, at least within his normal abilities that he was using. So they really made Ritualist kind of a spam, like you're able to spam unchecked power tokens and get a ton of them. So I think that offsets, or crits offsets the wider range, at least a little bit as far as value goes. This might surprise you a little bit where I put Ritualist. I'm putting him in S though, because he does fantastic against any enemies that do tokens, any factions that get tokens, but he doesn't need that to get value because he sets up for combo. He adds weak, adds Vuln that gets rid of dodges also. The Vuln Hex doesn't get rid of blocks. It just offsets blocks with the Vulns, so that maybe would be a reason that you would run Wanderer instead. But I think Ritualist is really, really good. The more, he's one of those paths where the more you understand about how the enemies tend to attack or how they're going to attack, you're going to get higher value out of that. Malediction, being able to invert tokens, at least when you master it, is really cool, alongside making whatever enemy you hit with that just like a pinata of positive tokens. So again, goes back to like boss fights, just an absolute really, really strong in boss fights. Bottom of S, just because, you know, by the nature of what he does, he's not gonna, you can't have three heroes that don't do damage and expect Ritualist to carry. But he raises the floor of your team so much because of, again, if you don't have maybe a ton of damage, the Vuln tokens will help with that. He can debuff the backline with Abyssal, with the unchecked power tokens, with the blinds. Ritualist is just an absolute menace. I love Ritualist. It's really one of my favorite paths. If you haven't played it that much, really, really play it. It's such a strong path. Again, if for no reason other than it's just so good against bosses. Ritualist, definitely, I love these debuff paths personally. I've always loved these debuff paths. I love to see what they did with Ritualist. I think it's so good. So Warlock is kind of a funny path. So with the old Warlock, it was just a glass cannon, right? That's it. It just did more damage, had less health. You know, worked for the time, but through the reworks, a lot of like stat changes and stuff like that, and like 1 or 2 button paths really have kind of fallen off. Paths have got a little more complicated, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean they do a little bit more. Their powers spread out a little bit more rather than being on like a couple of abilities. It was kind of funny during the reworks. Before they were public, they were still on beta and being kind of added. They tried to do some interesting things with Warlock, just make it a more interesting path more than just damage. So if you look at like the Malediction's a good example of something that they kind of tried out to make it more than just a damage path. But from what I saw, at least anecdotally from the feedback, people didn't want Warlock to be anything other than kind of what it was before. So it was kind of funny where they actually tried to branch it out to make it a more interesting path, but people want it to do damage, and people want it to be the damage, you know, carry in a way. And he still is. So it was kind of funny to see Red Hook sort of try to put him a certain way of like the other kind of new paths, and people being like, no, I want him to just do a ton of damage. So Warlock as it stands now, I think is stupid. The Chaotic Offering is a crazy ability in the context of his kit, and it's because it's like Howling in turn 1 doesn't happen really nearly as much like it used to, where you just blow an enemy up right off the bat. But Warlock still does that. So with Chaotic Offering, if you master it, it's a 60% chance you get an unchecked power token right off the bat. Then you can just press Chaotic Offering. Turn 1, you have 2. Turn 1, you can Burning Stars, and you just blow an enemy up. That doesn't exist nearly as much in the new path reworks because, at least in my opinion, it's kind of stupid. But he right off the bat just makes it a 4v3. It's just one of those paths that is just like so strong. It just doesn't really have any downsides, which I think is kind of dumb. I would have liked to see it go towards like the idea that Red Hook had, but clearly that's the community doesn't want that, which is okay. I'm all right with being the kind of minority. I understand people want their comfort picks. But yeah, Warlock is an insane path. The only thing, I guess, it does require some mastery points. So it does require a little bit more to get going, although it can still blow up at the beginning, like blow an enemy up at the beginning of the round, at least kill them or almost kill them. I guess it does require like Chaotic Offering you want to have mastered, Burning Stars you want to have mastered, Abyssal if you just want to sit on that flat damage. So it does require like a little bit of setup, but man, once you get it going, it's just this like, you know, dumb as the old Warlock is. And really along on top of all of that too, it has the best weird, at least the best weird like on average, right? To be able to give 2 regen. So he either won't bleed whoever you use if they have 2 Unchained power tokens, or it at least offset the bleed. So yeah, Warlock kind of got everything, and really it doesn't really have any downsides. It has less downsides than it did before. Chaotic Offering disabling in round start is not an actual downside, because who gives a shit if you can't get the round start unchecked power tokens if it's 4v3 2 seconds into the fight, right? So yeah, Warlock, I think people will love Warlock. Like I said, I'd like to see him be a little more interesting. Doesn't matter what I think, because I'm in the minority on this one, and that's totally okay. So Warlock, I have to imagine a lot of people like the new Warlock. Is pretty similar to the old one. When I was talking about Leper, I was talking about his paths getting kind of a glow up, specifically like Tempest and Monarch. I think Aspirant got a really nice one too. So I did play the old Aspirant because I did think Anamnesis being able to bleed the entire team, I think is really strong. But it was a frustrating path to play because Anamnesis on the old version, it didn't have a shuffle, and it was just the front 2 ranks. So there's a couple issues. First of all, you basically had to press Chaotic Offering on round 1 no matter what, because Anamnesis was not such a great ability that you would get. It would feel worth it if you only hit like 2 or 3. So you had to basically hit all 4 if you were going to size 2s. It felt shitty. And also by the nature of him potentially shuffling himself to Chaotic Offering, you'd hit Chaotic Offering, hoping to use Anamnesis, and then he'd throw himself to the back where you can't use it, or even back a single rank, right? So old Aspirant, I liked it for what it was worth, but realistically, other than somebody that has like a lot of hours in this game and doesn't mind experimenting with stuff, I probably wouldn't have played Aspirant if it was like 5 memories and I really didn't want to lose that. But I think new Aspirant I think is really cool. It has a dancing element to it. It can get unchecked power tokens pretty well, both through moving and through like sack stab or through kills or whatever. It can one-shot corpses with sack stab plus, so that's another way of getting unchecked power tokens. To be able to add an extra dot healer in the game, I think is really cool. I love Aspirant. I'm biased towards occultists in general, so I'm gonna put him kind of middle A right there. Aspirant's the only path that I run 2 unchecked power skills on. So running both Burning Stars and Anamnesis means if you're going to use either of them or both of them, you do have to master them really to get the true value out of them, because it lowers their unchecked power cost, which not a huge fan of, but I totally understand why that is the way that it is. And then you add another mastery point with Weird if you want to have if you want to get rid of dots, and then you sack stab if you want to one-shot corpses. So he can be mastery hungry, although I think it's fine. I think you could probably go without sack stab, maybe even probably go without Weird, depending on the rest of your team, or if you don't like Anamnesis. So I do love Aspirant. I would say Aspirant is maybe a little of a late game path, or like a Kingdom's path, because of the mastery points, where like in Confessions you have to spread those out a little more to your entire team, rather than, because you're not going to get 20-25 mastery points in the same way that you'd get in like Kingdoms. But I do think Aspirant is really cool. It enables for some really strong paths like Orphan, Ransack Spam, Banneret. It gives you a middle rank dancer, or it gives you even a 1-2 rank dancer. Although that'd be a little bit tough because he doesn't have taunts. He's not really like a true tank. It does give you some elements to sack stab into combo and give him a block or a block plus. I really like Aspirant. I think Aspirant's really cool. I understand if maybe somebody wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I think it can sow a lot of chaos. I know the Burning Stars not having nearly as much damage kind of hurts a little bit. I do think the burn element is nice to it, because it does actually burn. So I really like Aspirant. Another good example of a path that I would put in the A tier that I would really, really stand behind. I know it's not maybe team carry in the same way of like a Warlock is, but I think Aspirant is really solid. I think if it allows you to, this is one of those paths that also allows you to play like a Sharpshot, because it gives you a healer that doesn't necessarily need to sit in the back. So something like Sharpshot that can sit in the back works out a little bit better. I love Aspirant. I fit it really into any team that I can. And also, I mean, an extra element also that maybe holds him back a little bit is there's a pretty big difference between he can still get unchecked power tokens while he moves himself, meaning like Binding Shadows forward, sack stab backwards, but it helps to have somebody else do that also, so it can cut your team building a little bit, because it is really nice to have that. Aspiring overall, really good. I think it's a good example of like a solid A tier. Maybe a little biased, maybe a little high. Maybe the average person doesn't have it nearly as high. But I've seen what it can do, and I think it absolutely deserves to be here. We're down to our final 3 heroes. Wanderer, Plague Doctor. Thank you if you stuck around this long. So, Wanderer, Plague Doctor. So I think with her paths, you really need to... She doesn't really have any Wanderer adjacent paths, although you could kind of argue Alchemist. But I think like Surgeon, you have to run particular abilities. You need to run the tank abilities. You need to run Ounce of Prevention or Disorienting Blast and or Emboldening Vapors or whatever. Alchemist, at least in my opinion, I think you should run Cause of Death. I think you should run Magrain. And Physician, I think you should run Emboldening Vapors if you're able to do that. Or in Disorienting Blast. Like you kind of need to run the path skills in order to get the true value out of the paths, at least in my opinion. Which means that Wanderer's Jack of all trades sort of thing, flexibility, I think goes a long way. Where she has, obviously Plague Grenade, really strong skill. Noxious Blast, you're probably running on every or almost every. You're either running that or Incision on every path, right? Blinding Gas, I think, is really strong. Emboldening Vapors, I think, is really strong. I think sometimes you have to pick maybe a couple of those with other paths, but I do think Wanderer's flexibility, I think, is... I play Wanderer PD as its own path, where I don't touch some of the other Wanderers, but I do because of the flexibility. So I'm going to put her right here towards the like middle of A, kind of higher for the Wanderers, because I do think the Jack of all trades thing works out well with PD, where, again, you can run Alchemist as sort of like Wanderer adjacent, but there's going to be a lot of people that don't like that Noxious Blast doesn't straight up do damage, Plague Grenade does straight up damage, and it's a little kind of reliant on getting a piercing trinket or not. But other than that, I do value Wanderer PD. Honestly, you could probably put her a little bit higher, although I don't know exactly where I'd put her. But that being said, I'm just a big fan of like Blinding Gas, which that enables to open it up to. You can run both her heals, you can run Plague Grenade. So I really like the skill set with Wanderer PD. So I see the value in it personally. And I play Alchemist a little different, which I'll get into also. I don't really play it kind of like Wanderer adjacent personally. But yeah, her other paths, I think you really need to lean into the path skills a little bit, which kind of hurts your the ability, the flexibility to run certain abilities, at least in my opinion. But Wanderer PD is kind of right in the middle there, where you're able to run some really good abilities and have them be strong on their own. So for Alchemist, Cause of Death is a crazy loaded ability. The things that it can do, the way it can ignore tokens, the way it can just add ramping damage in general. It only has a 1-turn cooldown. It can reach 3 ranks. It's a super, super good ability. Yeah, they did make it so Noxious Blast and Plague Grenade they don't do damage, so therefore they don't break block tokens. Bit weird. I know some people are very okay with that, and other people are very not okay with that. I think probably the way to run Alchemist in general, I put her in rank 3 all the time, and I do Incision. Incision, Magrain, Cause of Death. It helps to have somebody on your team that can either bleed or blight, so they can do that on round 1. So rather than have everything set up yourself, where you're doing Incision, Magrain, Cause of Death, you have somebody else apply the blight or the bleed, and then you Magrain from there, and then Cause of Death on round 2. So I don't think that's super hard to set up, because you have like Open Vein, you have Bleed Out, you have just Yellowhand in general, you have Flagellant, you have trinkets to be able to Grave Robber, like if you're doing Venomdrop or Poison Dart or whatever. So there's a lot of easy ways to set that up. I know that one of the arguments I've seen with Alchemist, is at least playing the way that I like it, is it's too slow. My argument to that is always, you don't pick paths because they're good in zombie fights, you pick paths because they're good in the important fights. And Cause of Death is a perfect example of that, either versus size 2s, or if you're playing Confessions, the cultists are tanky enough to warrant kind of that setup. If you want to run it kind of like old Alchemist, where it's a Noxious Blast, Plague Grenade spam, you kind of need Piercing. So what you can do probably in Confessions is, I would say, put her in rank 3 and run the like Incision sort of thing, because it's better to get value normally rather than going through a lot of resists. And then you can choose the direction she goes based on Piercing. If you get Bleed Piercing from the Shroud, you can keep her in Incision. If you get Blight Piercing from the Fetter, you can that's where you can put her into sort of like the blight version of it, because it's going to feel less bad. Like ignoring the token, or not breaking block tokens, is not going to feel as bad if you're sticking that blight more often than not. So Alchemist is kind of interesting in that sense, where you play the path differently. You can play the path differently on the fly. So I think it's cool. It's one of the highest damage paths in the game, at least in my opinion, with Incision, Cause of Death, which again I think is the highest value on average way to play it. Although if you get into like arguments with piercing trinkets and stuff like that, it can change. The arguments can change, but that's how I think you should play it. In general, just have something in your team like a Flagellant that can apply a dot. So if you have a size 2 or something like that, you can really jump them with Cause of Death on round 2. It's just crazy damage. Snowballs very hard with damage quirks, damage trinkets. I think she definitely deserves to go into S. I haven't even talked about the fact that she's a healer through all of this also. You can play her just really aggressively, again, whether you play it through Noxious Blast, Plague Grenade, or if you do the Cause of Death Mag Rain kind of thing. I think it's crazy good. You're not really, like, yeah, you're losing the corpse clear of Mag Rain, but I'm not really sure that matters in the context of if you're running Alchemist with a team. You could honestly put her higher. You could put her like damn near, up here. This is just where I chose. But honestly, I would say she's like pretty damn close to busted, just because she's such a good healer, on top of doing a ton of damage and just being efficient in general. So Alchemist, I know a lot of people love the old Alchemist for sure, but honestly, damage-wise, I say she's pretty close, if not better than old Alchemist. So Surgeon, PD's frontline path. I'm going to let it be known right now, I'm going to defend this path. So I might be a little bit biased, probably a little bit biased. I am going to defend this path, though, because Surgeon be a frontline healer means that you can run things in the back that maybe otherwise you weren't able to, because backlines are typically in a game like this either healers or damage dealers. Or stress healers even. So how do you have it's tough sometimes to put backliners in that don't heal or don't stress heal specifically, and if you do have a damage dealer back there, then you have to make up for it with the other 3 heroes, which sometimes can be difficult. So Surgeon, I think, is a perfect example of when I was talking about how I define like the B tier. Maybe not the first path that you're going to go with, but one that will fill out a team, where if you want to play Sharpshot, if you want to play Warlock, and then you're like, okay, I want a more consistent heal, then maybe Warlock is able to provide. Or if you like, I want to play Sharpshot, I want to play Intermezzo, Sharpshot, Virtuoso, something like that, and you need a frontline healer, I think Surgeon does that pretty well, and she does buff the team. So what I will say is you have to lean to her abilities, right? She doesn't have a defender, right, or a bolster where you're getting really high value out of button presses that you'd be doing anyways. So if you look at a defender, to be able to give him, like, Man at Arms gets 2 block or 2 block pluses. Like, it's probably an ability you were using for the defend rather than the blocks. So to get good value out of that, whereas opposed to Surgeon, you have to go out of your way a little bit more to get those block tokens, or get those block plus tokens. So Surgeon, the old Surgeon was just an incision spammer. New Surgeon is, you can play her in rank 1 or rank 2, although in Confessions it's going to be a little bit harder, but you can put her in rank 2, rank 3. I really like the Ounce of Prevention on there. Debuff resist, stress resist, at least when you master it. Move resist can be really nice depending on the region that you're in or the fight that you're going against. I think what she does really well. The stacking Incision or the stacking Mag Rain, if you do want to do that. Just think of her as a path that opens up what you're able to do with the rest of your team comp and run some more sort of aggressive stuff. So if you do play Surgeon, you do need to have 2, if not 3, of the abilities that give her block tokens. So Disorienting Blast, really good. Ounce of Prevention is good for that, or Emboldening Vapors. And you need to, it's one of those paths that it's better off to have as much knowledge as possible as to what attacks you think are coming, because you need to get out ahead of that with one of those abilities and get that block token, and make sure that she always has a block token kind of at any given time, so that you're not sort of caught with your pants down, where she's getting crit and she's getting popped. So there's going to be some people that don't like Surgeon, just because she isn't that quintessential tank, and I totally get it, but I think if you get used to playing it, and you get used to playing it a little more defensively than maybe your instinct says, I think it works out really well. So I'm going to put her like top of B. You probably, if you're playing Confessions especially, you'll need your sort of quintessential tank next to her, or at least a taunter in some way. But Surgeon can do its job really well. You still get access to Battlefield Medicine. You still get access to Mad Rain, assuming you're putting her in rank 2. Indiscriminate Science, right? Still has really strong abilities against. I really love Ounce of Prevention. I think Surgeon does deserve to be there. I might be one of her more active or more vocal fans than probably most people, but I do really like Surgeon, and I like the team comps that you're able to play if you decide to run it. Hey, we're kind of getting to the point where you can start to guess where I'm putting some of these paths. There's only so many spots left. Okay, so Physician, Position's going to suffer from the fact that like Noxious Blast and Plague Grenade, especially Plague Grenade, right? Just blowing up the back line, adding a ton of dots right there, is such a strong playstyle with Plague Doctor in general. Although you can do that with Physician, you don't do it nearly as much. At least in my opinion, it's one of those paths where you really need to lean into the path skills to really like get the full value out of it. But I do think the path skills are good. I think Disorienting Blast, being able to shuffle, at least in some situations, the entire team around, I think is really cool. You can really mess up, although there is a lack of consistency with some randomness on as far as what it applies and how the shuffle gets applied. I do think it's just it's like dropping a bomb of like if you drop a combat item, it's just chaos, right? So I love Disorienting Blast for that. One of the changes they made, I think it was before Physician went live. It was when it was still in beta, public beta, and like people were testing it. Is Emboldening Vapors was AoE rather than single target. So it was AoE one token rather than single target multiple tokens, at least if you master it. So think of like Confessor Mantra. So Confessor Mantra can get rid of negative tokens on the entire team and heal them. The old Emboldening Vapors did that, but inverted the tokens rather than healing. So I kind of like that. Although I understand that the new, or that version, the AoE version, is more niche, because how often are you going to be getting negative tokens on multiple allies? Something like the Shrouder is really nice, where it adds a vuln to everybody or whatever, and you flip it. But admittedly, it was kind of niche, but I did like that better, because I think it gave the ability more of an identity, because I think nowadays it's just too close to Indiscriminate Science. And Indiscriminate Science is one of the best abilities in this game. So you can run both. I like to run both, but I run both with the idea that I'm probably not going to be using Emboldening Vapors nearly as much. It's probably like 80% Indiscriminate Science, 20% Emboldening Vapors. And also you can give an extra nod to Indiscriminate Science because there are some negative tokens that don't invert. So you're talking like Immobilizes or like Hunger tokens from the Harvest Child. Indiscriminate Science can get rid of those and heal, where like Emboldening Vapors can't do anything with it. So I do like Physician. I like Physicians for what it's worth. Again, it's competing with a really strong playstyle of like Plague Grenade. I think do not sleep on, same with Antagonist, do not sleep on constant weak tokens. To be able to add a weak token every turn with Noxious Blast, really, really good. Really, really strong. It gets debuff piercing into combo. If you want to put her in rank 3 and have a combo spammer on a pretty good ability already, which is Incision, you can do that. That's absolutely playable also. I think Physician probably doesn't get the love that it deserves. I would say I'm going to put it bottom of A right here. I think it fits in really well. It gives you some good heals. Again, I wish the Emboldening Vapors was the old version personally, because I just don't think it's going to get run very much. But Physician, good into different comps, whether it uses up combo with Noxious Blast or whether it sets up combo with Incision. Again, to be able to knock enemies around with Disorienting Blast. Again, if you're in a boss fight, yeah, you're probably not running Disorienting Blast, but you still can run Incision or Noxious Blast and just use that more often and get a ton of value. So I really like Physician. If you haven't tried it, try it with the skill set that I have, and I think you'll see if you can build a team that does a lot of damage. I think you can see its value. Wanderer, Runaway. The way I'm judging kind of Wanderer paths is really, is this a path that falls by the wayside when you have all the paths unlocked, or are the differences, is it jack of all trades just enough to be playable? I think Bonnie is kind of near the not super useful, just because I think her paths are strong, specifically Orphan and Survivor I think are strong. And they serve different purposes enough to where there's not really, at least in my opinion, a ton of reasoning to run Wanderer Runaway. I'll throw her here because I think if you have her in the front, you're probably better off with Orphan or Survivor, really. If you have her in the middle, you're probably better off with Orphan. And if you have her sitting in like rank 4 and just kind of tossing Fireflies, I think you're better off a little bit with Orphan. What I will say for Wanderer is that Wanderer still does have the smokescreen with the Vuln. So where Orphan has smokescreen with the weak token, and Survivor has the Thorns effect where adds the blinds. So I think if you really like that Vuln, if you really want that Vuln on smokescreen plus, that you can do that. Dragonfly comboing I think can be good if you're dancing kind of in the middle ranks with somebody. The chance of comboing I think can be nice, where like Orphan doesn't have that chance of combo, And Survivor doesn't really want to be in rank 3, so if you're pushing her in back there, she loses Searing Strike, so it can make it kind of awkward. So I think she's got some uses. I don't think they differentiate themselves so much that it's really worth playing super often, but I think there are some uses for it. Or Bonnie, I think, is strong in general. Probably better off specializing more often than not, at least to me. So after all the reworks are done, the first path that new players unlock with Bonnie is Arsonist. How fucking funny is that? The first it made sense with the old Arsonist because it was just like piercing. New Arsonist is like a fucking like a self nuke where you're just like launching her into the enemies and just seeing what happens. The fact that like I don't think they should necessarily move paths around, but the fact that's the first path that you unlock, you're like, what the fuck? And also like it uses backdraft a decent amount, and you're like, what is backdraft? It's the final upgrade. Arsonist, C. So when I gave a history of kind of like stacking paths a little bit, I think I was when I was talking about Ravager. Arsonist was sort of their first or one of the first attempts of having a ideal damage to myself, while also doing more damage to the enemies sort of path, and I don't think it's bad. I think Arsonist really, I think there's a couple issues. First of all, it requires a lot of setup. As far as the team that you build around her, it's a team that you do need to build the team around her, and also, you know, the top end of damage is pretty cool, but it just requires so much effort. And in a game like DD2, you want to have people focusing on other things rather than kind of hand-holding. You know, you think it's similar to like how Monarch used to be, where it was minus damage unless you're going against Cultist. You had to build a team around having somebody who was kind of actively not super useful, a little bit of a ball and chain holding the team down. Arsonist is kind of like that. I do think an issue with Arsonist also is that there's not a lot of ways to mitigate her burn, because if you get rid of it, you lose the stacks and you lose the power and you lose the damage. So all you can really do is mitigate that with regen. Where, yeah, 2 or 3 regen from Vestal is pretty nice, but if she's taking like 7, 8, 9 burn a turn and you're getting to that higher level, offsetting 2 or 3, that is not going to do a big deal. You can run Undying plus with Flagellant, which gives you 5, but even then, you're running a specific hero and a specific ability and using a mastery point on that specific ability just to kind of keep this hero alive. And as weird as it sounds, with Arsonist also, you kind of forget, like you're playing your own little mini game where you're like, okay, she's got 20 health and you know, she's got 7 burn per turn, so that means I can keep her alive for like 2 turns and then I'll need to heal her or something. But then the enemies attack her also. So she gets attacked during that, it throws off your math completely. If she hits Death's Door and she gets a weak token, you're like, fuck. So what people worry about with Intermezzo, which is accidentally killing your heroes. Arsonist is Arsonist is the worst version of that, where you really can kill her. So it requires a lot of setup. The damage she can do can be pretty damn good, but it's tough to set up, and again, you can't mitigate it in the same way that you can with some other scenarios. Like Ravager, she can resist her own bleed, right, if she's kind of low, which can be nice. You can give her bleed resist for that. Arsonist can't resist her own burn. Obviously, it would cut the damage around a little bit. So Arsonist is not terrible. It just was kind of a prototype on what turned into like sort of a Ravager style path. It needs some work. It's a good example of when I said with C tier it's just a path that needs a little something. Admittedly, I don't know what that is, because fundamentally it is a tough path to balance, because if you get into Mag Rain, you know, Encore, Zealous, like the top end is crazy. There's a gif from early when she first came out on beta where she one-shot the locks, like completely one-shot them with backdraft. Like it required, right, some like Mag Rain Encore setup. So you're always going to have that where the ceiling could be like game breaking, but the floor is just so low that it's crazy. So Arsonist is fine. I mean, it's fun to play around with every once in a while. It just requires, I think, a little bit too much work. Back to paths that got really good glow-ups. Survivor got a really good glow-up. So it was the path before had some synergy because it was a better healer, but like it lost burn piercing and stuff like that. It was just one of those things that the idea fundamentally of having a sort of utility path on Runaway isn't inherently a bad idea. It just didn't quite work with the old Survivor. I think new Survivor now is nuts, though. It is such a high value path. I think it's one of the coolest paths out there, because the idea is that you get stealth typically through smokescreen, but you can also do it through run and hide. And then it gives a more and more effect, right? So on basically at the beginning of her next turn, so you press Smokescreen, gives her a couple taunts, gives her Thorn effects of adding, being able to hand out blinds or hand out blinds in combos. And then at the beginning of her next turn, she gets 2 stealth tokens that you can do a few different things with. With 2 stealth tokens, you can get a guaranteed crit on Searing Strike, which is cool because it has an on crit element to it also, where it's better. Ransack can steal 1 positive token per stealth token or 2 positive tokens per stealth token, so you can have up to 4 if you have Ransack Plus. Or you can use Hearthlight to heal her, to pop the stealth and heal her. So that is really, really cool because you have Smokescreen that's a really good ability anyways, and then you have 3 branches that you can go off of depending on what type of fight it is. If it's a Sprawl and you're going against a lot of dodge tokens, Ransack Plus ignores dodge, so you can steal those. If you're going against in the Tangle, they have the block tokens, you can steal the block tokens. Obviously, Searing Strike to being able to crit is really good just in general. It does a lot of damage, does have a lot of burn to it. More likely, it's kind of like it has the piercing because it's 20% burn piercing with the crit, so if you decide to use it like that, I think Survivor is a great, great, great path. It has a dodge tank element to it, which I think is really cool, where she has a chance of getting a dodge or a dodge plus if she's under 75% when she gets healed. That counts with regen, so that's where like the Hearthlight value comes into. While I don't think Hearthlight is probably worth running just because it's only usable on her, and if you're really worried about, I think Run and Hide is like close enough. Run and Hide gives her the regen, gives her the stealth. I think it's close enough. You're probably better off running Run and Hide in my opinion. But I think Survivor is a crazy good path. I know people are going to say she has a taunt and she's squishy. I understand that. But what I say is like, just don't press the button if she's low. That's what you have Run and Hide for, or you have the dodges for, right? Is she your Man-at-Arms tank, your Carcass, your Flagellant tank? No. But I think in most fights, like in a fights where like you're not taking an Act 4 boss hit or a Limerence hit, I think she can taunt pretty much in every scenario where, yeah, she might get hit, but she's not going to get popped like from full health or something like that. So just don't play into that nearly as much into a boss fight, or if you do it kind of sparingly. I absolutely love Survivor. I love having different branches of what you can do based on the fights and based on what the situations. You do get a little bit of Hearthlight value too if you want to run. That's where like you would run Wanderer, Occultist, where you hands the stealth out, or you have Grave Robber. I don't think that that's really what you're gonna do, because I think probably just doesn't work out that well. Silent Treatment, maybe if you have somebody who's Silent Treatment, you can do it like that. Absolutely love Survivor. Probably like top 5 favorite paths in this game. Haven't played her and you decide to give her a shot, give her a shot. Worst comes to worst, you can have like a Sergeant in the back guard her, Vestal in the back guard her, in case you are worried about her getting popped. But I think Survivor, I think the upsides are way bigger than the downsides are. With Orphan, I really like that they kept the idea of old Orphan, but gave it an extra spin and made it cooler. So the old Orphan, the idea was that if you put her in the back, she gets better burn, and if you put her in the front, she gets better damage. But a positive, they're opposites. A positive to one is a negative to another. So they kept that. I think that's one of those that, in my opinion, it's kind of tough to balance. But I think they did a really good job with this one, because now it depends on how you play it rather than the position that she's in. So that's really cool. You can play her kind of into 2 paths, like damage, where she gets extra damage, or you can play her with the extra burn, depending on the fight, depending on your comp, depending on whatever. So you can actually play into both of those also, but it is kind of tough. So the idea with damage is she just needs to move ranks once per turn. The idea with the burn element is that she needs to end the turn in the same rank that she started with. So you can get value out of both of those, where moving her out of a rank and then having her get moved back. Really, the best way to do that is either a something like a Jester, where you have Jester Razor Wits forward, and then Orphan Ransacks after that. It gets a little tough. It's easy to mess up. It's easy for speed rolls to mess up also. So it's kind of tough to do. But Orphan, I think, is really, really strong. Getting flat damage, back to what I was talking about with Soloist, flat damage is really good. So her getting flat damage on Orphan, really good. She fits into, it's sort of like 2 paths in one, in a sense, where you can sit her in the back and you can have her get the extra burn value. You can sit her in rank 1 and give her the extra burn value, or you can jump around with her and try to get value out of both, or maybe one or the other. It's very flexible in that sense. I really like Orphan. Very strong, especially early game. So if you're running one of the harder torches, if you're running like a Bastard's Beacon, her ability to get extra damage or extra burn by not having to use necessarily mastery points in order to do that can make her really strong in the early regions and give the rest of your team an ability to kind of like ramp up a little bit with their mastery points or with their trinkets or whatever. Not going through, that's what the weak token is for. So if they do hit through the blind, it's still less. So that can be really good against, Act 3 or anything else that does a lot of damage. The Orphan, really, really strong. Kind of set and forget in a way, meaning like you put her into your team. As long as you build the team around the way that you want to play her, meaning like whether she moves or not, you can really kind of sit and forget her. You don't really have to watch her buffs nearly. Like keep an eye on them, although you absolutely can do that. She'll get them pretty naturally. Yeah, Orphan, really strong. Borderline S, I could easily put it in there, depending on the day. But yeah, I love Orphan. Just really, really good and just fits nicely into whatever you need it to do and whatever team comp you need it. But last but not least, we have Vestal. So as you can see, I have 2 of her paths in the S tier, 1 in the A, 1 in the B. You could probably guess roughly where they go, at least the top path and the bottom path. So Vestal's kind of funny as a hero because her paths are probably the most different from any other hero, where you have Confessor, where you're running probably like Mantra and Illumination, which you're probably not running on the other paths, at least not nearly as much. Chaplain has Mace Bash and Hand of Light, where Seraph has the Consecration. So you have like, they're very, very split, where like some abilities you're only really gonna run on those paths, though you can do like Frontline Wanderer and stuff. I don't think it's that great. So Wanderer Vestal's value is in running some of the abilities that you don't get to run otherwise. So I would say Divine Comfort, for example, like to be able to regen, it's a tough fit on some of the other paths. Like Seraph is kind of restrictive in the ranks that are, or in the abilities that it run. Confessor, I think, is another one of those where you really want to run the path abilities to get the value out of them. Chaplain, you do run Divine Comfort, but if you need a better healer, that's what Wanderer is for. So I think Wanderer also, the only abilities, at least the way that I run it, as you can see here, the only abilities that I run that use the conviction tokens are Judgment and Divine Grace. So it is more of a, you can get to that 3 conviction token big buff, whether it be the damage and the burn of Judgment or just like a big heal. You get that more often, at least I do in my experience. I get that more often on Wanderer. So again, the ability to run, to have a stress heal and to have Sanctuary and to be a backline guarder, which are extremely strong in this game, and to run Divine Comfort, which is a really, really probably underrated ability by the average player, especially in Kingdoms when you're talking about fatigue. I think she deserves to be bottom of S right here. I think, although you're probably not running the Consecrations, I think you absolutely could. I would just rather have the 5 turns personally, but the flexibility to run some of the abilities, it's kind of tough to run Sanctuary on Confessor, in my opinion. It's tough to run it on Seraph. It doesn't stress heal on its own on Chaplain, but be able to get the Wanderer is like right in the middle where you get to get good value out of it. Again, Divine Comfort, tough to run on the other ones. This is the only path, at least in my opinion, where you really can run both Divine Grace and Divine Comfort, and I think they both fit into teams nicely. They work really well. I love Wanderer Vestal. It's like a comfort pick kind of for me, where if you dropped me into a run and you were like, all right, you have one attempt to do this, Wanderer Vestal honestly might be on there. So that one might be the most surprising of the opinions that I have left, but I think Wanderer Vestal very, very strong. When I was talking about Maniac earlier, so now we're talking about Confessor. When we were talking about Maniac earlier, so Confessor at one point got not a rework, but a touch-up, would be the best way to put it. So it got a bit of a touch-up where it still stayed pretty identical to what it was before, but got some nice quality of life things. And I think it took off from there. I think Confessor is such a good path. I run Hand of Light. I run her in rank 3 in Hand of Light with an early mastery point, just because I think weak tokens are really strong, and be able to put it into 2 targets and to be able to hit into dodges at the same time, to be able to hit into riposts and not have her have a huge issue. But I think I'm the weirdo. I don't think most people run it like that. But Mantra, obviously very, very strong ability. You're talking like a Harvest Child fight. You're talking the Shroud, like with the Fish Breath, right? Just a great example of a path that bails you out of ton of situations. So I'm putting her right here, top of S, like in 6 right here. it is such a good it's such a good path. I would say, you know, borderline top 5 path in the game. Really, it's a good example of what I was talking about when I defined the S tier, is a path that can bail you out of a ton of situations. Ministration's really, really strong. You don't have to worry about the use limit like you do with Plague Doctor. To be able to hit every rank, to be able to add negative tokens to every rank, to be able to get rid of negative tokens. Just such a loaded path. Such a fun path. The fact that it can apply to debuffs to enemies so well while also kind of getting rid of yours. Absolutely a staple pick, depending on what you need. The illumination is really good, especially if you know you're heading into like riposte or you know, just a ton of dodge tokens in general. More useful on average than like the Wanderer Illumination, since Wanderer Illumination only deals with dodges. But yeah, Confessor, absolutely great path. One of my favorites for sure. Another one that's like, if you told me I had one run to try and win, Confessor might be in there. Definitely one of the strongest paths in the game. Absolutely well deserving of S, well deserving of one of the best paths in the game. Chaplain is a path that drives me insane, and I will tell you why. Because back to when I was talking about Confessor giving a little bit of a touch up, and Chaplain did get a little bit of a touch up, but it is so close to being a pretty damn solid path, like right up there with Surgeon, but it's just not quite there. And there's a couple of reasons. First of all, Divine Comfort not being usable in rank 1, I think is unnecessary. You can use it in rank 2, but I think it's unnecessary. Why is that gated like that? The mantra cooldown, why is that gated like that? If it is gonna be a 2-turn cooldown, at least have whoever she's guarding be able to get the full heal and the stress heal also. It either needs to be a 1-turn cooldown or it needs to be a 2-turn cooldown and have the guarded get the same heal and stress heal that she does. It's just no reason for it to be way that it is. Why is Ministrations only usable in the front 2 ranks? If you look at Banneret, from like Crusader, from Wanderer Crusader to Banneret Crusader, rather than like Banneret's a backline path, right? Rather than having Battle Heal only be usable in 3 and 4, it's open up to all ranks. Why not do the same thing with Vestal? I used to play backline Chaplain, back with the old Chaplain. I think it was like a slightly different Wanderer. It was like a Wanderer that you rely on guards a little bit more to get those conviction tokens. There's no reasons Ministrations needs to be gated by rank 1 or rated to gain rank 1 and rank 2. Have it usable at least in 3, if not in all ranks. It's not like Ministrations is a broken ability. It doesn't change anything from Wanderer or from any of the other paths. You either have to put her in rank 2 so that you can get Divine Comfort value, because you have Divine Grace, right? But then if she gets pushed back a single rank, you lose Mace Bash, you lose Hand of Light, you lose Ministrations. And it's just like, why? Like, Chaplain will never, this is what I say about a frontline Vestal, she will never take over this game. And by that I mean like the quintessential tank, Scourge, Wanderer, Carcass, and she will never have so much damage that she's like Sharpshot, right? Or like Warlock. So why does she have these handcuffs on her as if she would be? Like, none of these changes that I just said would torpedo her anywhere other than like further up the tier. I'll put her in like middle of B right here. I like the idea of Chaplain. I really do. Frontline Vestal is never going to take over this game, but it's treated as if it is. So when I talk about Scourge and Wanderer Man-at-Arms, for example, it feels like their balance is from a different, it's like not consistent with certain other paths. And Chaplain's a perfect example where Chaplain has these handcuffs on her, and like fucking why. And also you would argue, so first of all, back to the mantra argument. Mantra's already gated by conviction tokens anyways, so there's really no reason to have a fat cooldown on it, because it requires the player being knowledgeable enough about where the enemies are going to hit to get those conviction tokens, and also the enemies might not even attack her anyway, so she might not get it. Another thing too, how come she has a 60% chance to get an extra conviction token on crit? What the fuck number is 60%? That is the only time in this entire game that 60% exists. In the context of the balance of this video game, they made up that fucking number just to put on Chaplain so that she doesn't get 2 conviction tokens too often. If it was 75, why not buff it to 75? Why not buff it to 100? Who gives a shit? It's fucking frontline Vestal. She doesn't get Divine Grace. She doesn't get Judgment. Drives me insane. I fucking love Chaplain. but she just need the things that frustrate me the most when it comes to games like this is not when a path is total garbage. It's when a path is like one or two changes away, like one or two minor changes would really make a big difference, and then it doesn't happen. I want to see Chaplain get some love. I think it has an important use in this game, again, with paths like Intermezzo, Virtuoso, Sharpshot, Sergeant, these things that are backliners that are not your typical like health healer kind of backliner. I think it puts a premium on the ones that the few paths that can frontline heal. And although she can't frontline heal per se, she does have ministration, so it does that does give her that element at least. There's just God, Chaplain is just so close to being good. People have asked me before, like, what change would you make in the game? I definitely would make a change like that to Chaplain, like was said with ministrations or with Mantra, because I would know that overnight, you know, they say in like the IT world, you don't have an update, you don't drop an update on Friday, because if shit hits the fan, you're gone for the weekend. Chaplain, those Chaplain adjustments are something that I could say that I could do on a Friday in this situation and leave for the weekend knowing that everything's not going to be burning when it comes back, when I come back. I like Chaplain. Please give it some love. Fight for me, people. I want Chaplain to get some love. It's so close there. I think it's a lot of fun. I like Chaplain. The final path we will be talking about is Seraph. So as you can see, I have her middle of A right here. I think probably some people are surprised why I have her so low and not higher, like in S or anything. And here's my argument. You are stuck with Judgment. You're stuck with Divine Grace. You're stuck with both Consecrations. That's 4 abilities right there. That means you have one slot for some pretty important abilities. Divine Comfort, for example, which can offset the fact that you only have 1 heal with Divine Grace and the cooldown. Illumination, if you happen to be going into a situation where you want Illumination, whether the Sluice or whatever. Ministrations, right? Another really strong ability to fit that slot. Mantra is the typical kind of fit there because it gives you a second heal, and kind of more importantly, it gives you a fat heal on the way out of combat, where you don't need those conviction tokens anymore, or if the conviction tokens are on their final turn, might as well pop them for a big heal. So Mantra is the strongest there, but that means you have a healer. It doesn't have dot heal, which is kind of weird. Doesn't have regen, which I think is a really strong ability. I know Seraph is great for what it is. You being locked into 4 of the 5 skills, to me, knocks it down a little bit. That might just be something that I value. I know that there's some people like Seraph is an absolute comfort pick for people. I don't know how I would fix it, but it's almost like if you could combine the convictions into 1, I don't know how the hell you would do that. But if you could somehow do that, then it would give her an extra slot, and then that would be good. I think 3, at least on a path, I think like 3 skills, 3 must-run skills, I think is pretty good. Anything more than that, you start getting into like handcuffy a little bit. It's partly a problem too, quote unquote, because she just has good skills, right? If you had nothing worthy of that 5th slot, it wouldn't really matter. Maybe I'm disrespecting Seraph a little bit. You are more than welcome to yell at me if you're a huge Seraph person. I think it's really good at what it is, at what it does, obviously with dancing teams and just making damage dealers take off or making tanks take off. The 5 rounds is super good, but I just like the abilities. I like the abilities that you have to take off. And I think that kind of sucks. But as a path, it's great. Like I said, you're more than welcome to yell at me. I just think having to run the same skills every time, I think just hurts it a little bit. But it is an absolute great path. Possible I'm disrespecting it. That's just kind of how I feel. Hey, if you stuck with me this whole time, or you're just watching this for any reason, hey, thanks. I appreciate it. A very long video, but I think a video that needed to be done. And I think it's nice to have kind of a library of my thoughts on paths. And especially with them unlikely to be changed anytime soon, I think that it is a solid library. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. The final tier list is in the description alongside my Discord, Twitch. If you would like to hang out there, please subscribe and stuff. What did I miss? What did I surprise you with? How do you disagree with me? How do you hate me? There's nothing in here that I threw in here for like clickbait purposes. This is genuinely how I feel about all these paths. Obviously, I'm going to have some biases, just like anybody else did, but there's nothing in here that is thrown in here for a shock factor. I stand by everything that I put in here. So thank you very much. I hope you have a nice rest of your day. I will always be releasing more guides for Darkest Dungeon 2, so if you're interested in those, please check out other videos that I have and the videos that I have in the future. Thank you very much. I hope you have a nice rest of your day.